Yuna here, and today we're going to find out, can you beat Dragonage Origins as a solo rogue? Let's go over the rules. We must avoid having party members whenever possible. Non-party allies are allowed. Any companions the game forces us to take along must do the bare minimum. We'll set their tactics to wait, we won't assign their attribute, skill, or talent points, and we'll remove their gear, with the exception of body armor because I don't want YouTube to freak out. But we'll give them clothing or bad armor. They can't craft, pick locks, or disarm traps. The only exception is the battle near the end that's carried out by party members that aren't fighting the Archdemon. Optional companions must be avoided. I wouldn't have this rule for standard solo runs, but when we did this as a mage, the viewer who suggested it wanted a Fewest Companions Possible Run, and since our mage had to contend with stricter rules, it seems only fair that our rogue and warrior have to as well. We may remove this rule for later games in the series. If an optional quest forces us to take companions along, it must be skipped. No glitches or gameplay mods. Official DLC is allowed, but I only own the Stone Prisoner DLC on this account, so most DLC items are unavailable to us. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank our very patient channel members for helping make this all possible. In the You Broke the Tip Jar tier, we have Ginger Knight. In the bigger tip jar tier, we have K Plays Music and Games. And in the tip jar tier, we have Jack1165, Burge117, Ace of Kestrels, Ragnarok, Tox, and Bwezu. We won't be covering the story in depth. There's too much to fit in one video. However, some quests will be discussed briefly, so spoiler warnings and all that. Also, this game gets dark. We won't cover much in detail, but you've been warned. All origins have temporary companions. The strictest interpretation of the rules would require us to pick Dwarf Commoner or City Elf as they have the fewest companions required, but I didn't want to lock out most origins over characters we'll never have in our party again, with one exception. Human nobles start with Barkspawn. As much as I love him, he's an optional companion for other origins, so we must pick another origin and we can't help him in Ostagar. We're playing a rogue, so all origins besides Magi are open. Our race and origin also determine our starting skills and, in theory, our starting talent, but all rogues start with dirty fighting, so that part's moot. However, let's take a moment to go over skills. Rogues get up to 12 skill points by leveling and gain a skill point after finding the Urn of Sacred Ashes, which is weaker than the talent or spell point other classes get, but will make it work. Based on the level our mage reached, 21, I'm expecting us to get 10 or 11 points plus 3 starting skills plus up to 3 skill tomes if we somehow need them. Rogues require combat training for weapon talents, so we must raise it to match the highest rank archery or dual-wielding talent we want, and I'm assuming we'll need all 4 ranks. Speech checks require 25, 50, 75, or 100 points to pass. Each rank of coercion adds 25 points to all speech checks, and each point of cunning above 10 adds 1 to persuasion only. In theory, we could pass all persuasion checks without coercion with 110 cunning, but even if we somehow got that much cunning, avoiding all speech checks until that late in the game is unrealistic at best. However, skipping the 4th rank of coercion should be doable if we need the skill point to go somewhere else. We'll want a rank of herbalism to make healing potions and 2 ranks of poison making for grenades. 2 ranks of survival, 1 rank of trap making, and 1 rank of stealing are needed for side quests. Starting skills for Rogue are solid, but City Elf and Dwarven Noble grant coercion or combat training respectively, which we'll want the earliest. City Elf offers Fang, a unique dagger that on console offers good bonuses for rogues. While I prefer the Dwarven Noble origin, the gear it offers is better suited to warriors, so we'll move forward as a City Elf. I will not describe the story of our origin as it involves sexual assault. We'll also be playing a male warden this time because female city elves get far less XP due to them being forced to skip a large chunk of the combat in this origin. This is my least favorite origin, if that wasn't clear. I won't go into talents because I haven't planned them out yet, but I know we'll pick lethality to use cunning instead of strength for damage. However, we'll still need strength to meet gear requirements. While our endgame weapons, Farsong, Fang, and Rose's Thorn, only need dexterity, endgame light armors require 20 strength. We might squeak by with accessories that grant strength, like the Key to the City, the Harvest Festival Ring, and Antruel's Blessing. So we'll likely have 14 base strength, the lowest willpower and constitution we can get by with, and put all remaining points in dexterity and cunning. Magic is pointless. Cunning also raises mental resistance, so magic just makes potions more effective. Don't get me wrong, fully healing with lesser potions as a mage was amazing, but it isn't worth tons of attributes when it's not contributing to our damage. Also, I'm calling them potions because 1, poultice is harder for me to say, and 2, characters drink them instead of applying them topically. I will die on that hill. We put our starting attributes in cunning. I considered dexterity to improve our attack, defense, and physical resistance, but we need cunning to disarm traps. We pick up rank 2 combat training in case we want rank 2 weapon talents in the near future, and use our talents to obtain deft hands and dual weapon sweep. I planned to invest in archery and stealth to see if stealth archers worked as well here as they do in Elder Scrolls games, but we can't take combat stealth until level 8, so we'll have to get by in melee until then regardless. We're starting on Nightmare difficulty. It isn't a failure if we drop the difficulty, but I want to try. While we can raise the difficulty after lowering it, it's easier to follow if I say, here's where we decrease the difficulty, and you can safely assume that's where it remains. Casual massively boosts our healing resistances, attack, defense, and damage, while reducing the enemy's resistances. Normal removes our bonus resistances and healing and enemies' resistance penalties, but still gives us smaller bonuses to attack, defense, and damage. Hard removes those bonuses, reduces our healing, and boosts enemies' tactics and resistances. Nightmare reduces our resistances and increases enemies' resistances further. Higher difficulties also increase enemies' physical and mental resistances, which make crowd control effects like stun less likely to work. And the difficulty also affects the duration of crowd control effects when they do work. That last one is, in my opinion, one of the most noticeable things about changing the difficulty. Like, yeah, you notice you're not hitting as often, or you're not hitting for as much damage, and you're not healing as much. Those are all noticeable. But seriously, like, freeze and stun and other crowd control effects just barely doing anything. Yeah, it's insanely noticeable in solo runs. I'll tell you that for nothing. Our mage only had trouble with a few origin fights, and frankly, some were due to me being rusty. But in our rogue's origin, almost every fight was deadly. The Mabari caused so many reloads that this warden may have good reason to ignore Bark Spawn once we get to Ostagar. One got confused when we opened his kennel, resulting in a mess where we could hit with dual weapon sweep, while the Mabari never landed any hits. Facing multiple guards was tricky. I settled on using dual weapon sweep, fleeing until it was off cooldown, rinse and repeat. In one-on-one fights, we used dirty fighting to stun. Without allies to distract foes, this is the only way we can reliably backstab, which is a problem since rogues don't get many crowd control options. Bards get captivating song, but they can't attack while singing, so without a party, it's useless. Beyond that, we have dirty fighting, as well as riposte and punisher on the dual weapons tree, and pinning shot and scattershot on the archery tree. Pinning shot doesn't have prerequisites, so we'll pick it up soon. But scattershot is at the end of its line, and all these talents except scattershot are single target, so I suspect we'll have trouble against groups the entire run. Some poisons also have a chance to stun. That being said, we can't craft much until we get access to vendors that sell components, so for now we're limited to whatever we find. Thankfully, we saved most of the potions we found for the noble we're here to remove because the door to his quarters shut behind us, leaving us no room to maneuver, and we burnt through most of our supplies, taking out him and his goons. It's critical that we don't take his bribe, as doing so would understandably make the elves and the alienage hostile to us when we return, and we won't be able to get Fang, the dagger we picked this origin for. Also, for once, it's pretty truthful to just tell everyone that we did everything ourselves and don't involve our cousin at all, because we literally told him to stand there and do nothing. Out in the wilds, we face darkspawn archers that turn us into pincushions. It's difficult to split up groups, and taking down more than one enemy at a time is difficult. Some can be cheesed by running until they switch to ranged weapons, using dual weapon sweep to interrupt their attacks so they switch back to melee, and running away again. We had trouble with the emissary on a bridge that ran to try to lead us across a bunch of traps, but he returned after we refused to follow, and we blocked his attacks with a small tree while we shot him with our bow. Sadly, he was the only one that worked on. Archers just shuffled to the side to fire back. The groups of Genlock rogues were one of the only encounters where we might have fared slightly better than our mage because we could take out weaker ones with a couple dual weapon sweeps. The stronger rogues by the campfire were rough, but not as bad as the alphas. First, the wolf alpha. His packmates ran forward without him as long as we didn't aim at the alpha until we took them all down, but even on his own, the alpha took several tries. We shot while he was closing in, but it didn't amount to much, and once he was in melee, all we could do was lead him around and occasionally turn and dual weapon sweep him. If we stood and meleeed him, he'd be far more likely to use Shred or Overwhelm. Overwhelm in particular would rip over half our health away, and there were several tries where we were only a couple sweeps from victory and he decided to use it. Dirty fighting was useless. The elite rank indicated by the Wolf Alpha's yellow name made its stun so short we'd barely get an attack in before it wore off. We eventually got him, but we had to use precious potions. The Hurlock Alpha was also bad. Like the Wolf Alpha, his rank made dirty fighting worthless, and while we removed most of his underlings before fighting him, one Hurlock refused to separate from him and we couldn't take both down at once. While the ranged weapon switch interrupt did work, they almost never switched weapons at the same time, and even when they did, it was hard to hit both of them with dual weapon sweep. After several tries, we managed to outrun the weaker Hurlock and fought the Alpha one-on-one with weapon switch cheats. You want to guess how long this all took? According to OBS, it took 4 hours. That's just the wilds. If you throw in our origin, we're at about 6 hours. At this point, we'd taken out all the enemies in the wilds and completed all available side quests but 2. One to save Barkspawn, which we can't do, and one where we battle an optional boss called Gazareth. I'd considered lowering the difficulty several times already, particularly during the Wolf and Hurlock Alpha fights, and I was all but certain I'd have to drop the difficulty here. We were getting nowhere, for several reasons. Gazareth has a lot of health and hits like a truck. Those are the most simple reasons. But on top of that, one of his attacks, Slam, heals him by roughly 20 points, which is about 2 or 3 of our attacks. We also miss him a lot, which doesn't help. If he uses Fire Blast, we may as well reload unless we have potions to burn, which we don't. We have one lesser one that heals less than half our health. Poisons hardly did anything. At best, we'd get 1 nature damage per attack. This is also where I learned poisons only work on melee weapons. Dirty fighting was useless since shades are immune to stuns. After several tries, we returned to Ostagar to hand in the vials of Darkspawn blood for the joining to Duncan. Since we don't have the treaties yet, we can get XP from this without advancing the plot and skipping Gazareth. Sadly, it didn't quite get us a level. The level up indicator in the corner is for Alistair, not us. I wanted to get Pinning Shot to see if it would help, but in retrospect, I don't think it would have because crowd control barely does anything to bosses on Nightmare, regardless of what kind of crowd control it is. However, while we were at Ostagar, we stopped by the Quartermaster and bought lesser health potions, bringing us to 9 total, and adjusted our equipment. We'd also picked up fire and ice arrows somewhere along the way, so I figured we may as well try them. The fire arrows didn't do anything, and the ice ones added 1 glorious point of damage per arrow. Not that it made much of a difference. As a last-ditch effort, we led Gazareth to a spot where I'd noticed we were able to run up a steep bank in the hopes of confusing his pathfinding so we could pick away at him with our bow. And by some miracle, we broke his brain so badly after a few cycles of this that he locked up. We're taking that victory and running with it, but I am very doubtful of our chances against the ogre at the top of the Tower of Ishal on Nightmare. Something I'm noticing more than I did as a mage is the sluggishness of the controls. I've played Dragon Age Origins before, so I know the controls are emotionally unavailable at best, but when playing as a rogue who's expected to quickly step behind enemies to backstab or turn to dual weapon sweep, it's a far bigger issue. I'm also more worried about our long-term viability. As a mage, we were constantly gaining new ways to ruin enemies' days, and if I did it again, I could definitely beat it on hard. Even Nightmare would be possible if I had the patience to retry until we got good spell resistance luck. I'm already out of ideas for our rogue though, and we're still in Ostagar. I'm banking hard on combat stealth, but even if it works, we need to somehow reach level 8. It's time to make our way up the Tower of Ishal, and I noticed the mage who joins us at the base of the tower casts flame weapons. We didn't get an NPC mage when we were playing as one, so it wasn't an issue. And this time around we told him to deactivate it after we lobotomized his tactics so we didn't get the extra fire damage. So how does the tower go? Buckle up. We have about half a dozen potions starting out, and we aren't finding many. The difficulty affects that as well, by the way, so we cling to each one like solid gold. The fights outside aren't that bad thanks to the non-party soldiers distracting the Darkspawn. They barely deal damage, but they're tough, especially if we only advance far enough to see the nearest Darkspawn to prevent the archers further away from shooting. That being said, they aren't invincible, and they managed to kill-steal the Hurlock Alpha, forcing us to reload and fight it again so we could get XP for slaying it. Inside the tower was far worse. The rooms and corridors are smaller and limit sight lines. You'd think this would make it easier to split enemies up, but the opposite is true as we're forced to initiate combat closer to them. Every fight on the first floor was like pulling teeth, with several reloads when we failed to break one or two foes off from a group. We only got past the emissary in the first room after picking off the nearby minions, and then breaking his AI by wedging ourselves next to a large pillar. I doubt we could have outdamaged his life drain spell if his AI hadn't borked, so that's another battle saved by sheer luck. One particularly rage-inducing encounter was past the first large room. When we opened either door to the small rooms on the far side, not only would we be facing a group of Darkspawn, 3 Genlocks in one room and 4 Hurlocks in the other, the group from the room we didn't open would rush over even if we opened the first room while stealthed and didn't alert anything. The ones that ran over wouldn't return to their room afterwards, so we were stuck with 7 Darkspawn in one room. We could sneak by to reach the next floor, but skipping fights will screw us in the long run since we'll get less XP. Fighting alone doesn't give us tons of bonus XP like in some party-based RPGs. According to the wiki, we're getting all of 2 extra XP per kill because we're landing the final blow on everything, which won't make up for skipping fights. There are random encounters, but the ones with enemies aren't repeatable, so XP is limited, especially since we can't complete most DLC or companion quests. That's why we didn't skip Gazareth earlier. It took me several tries to find a method of luring 2 of the 3 Genlocks without alerting anything else. We open this door while stealthed and start running, if you can call this movement speed running, back towards the big room we came through. Then we drop out of stealth right before the last Genlock runs past the archway and out of our line of sight. There's a random element. The Genlocks are sometimes more spread out, making it easier to avoid alerting the 3rd Genlock or the Hurlock that kept running in for some reason. Clearing out 2 enemies without chugging potions was tricky. 3 would force us to use an unsustainable amount. For reference, getting into the tower and clearing the first floor took 2 hours. I didn't have a mic on. I usually don't during challenges unless I suspect something I say in the moment will be interesting and won't get me demonetized, and almost everything failed the second part of that here. We hit level 6 after the last enemy on the first floor, so that was good timing at least. We have a skill point and there are a few ways we could go. Rank 3 combat training would allow us to take rank 3 weapon talents, which we want but won't be able to take for a while because our talents will be bound up taking combat stealth and lethality, and their prerequisites, for a bit. Rank 2 poison making would let us make grenades, but we don't have components, so it wouldn't help now. Rank 3 coercion would guarantee passing all but the hardest speech checks, but sadly we can't persuade the ogre. That leaves herbalism, which could have been far more useful, but I mucked up and forgot to buy flasks, and we've only found 1. Still, 1 is better than nothing, and we'll be able to buy flasks after we rescue Bodane if we can make it that far. The second floor was a slog. There's a large chamber with closed rooms on either side and a closed room leading to the next floor. There were 3 Hurlocks and 4 Genlocks in the main room, guarding the hallway leading to the stairs. On top of that, there were enemies in the side rooms who would run out to join the fight. However, the Darkspawn in the main room would usually stay put if we attacked the ones in the side rooms, so we cleared those out first. The one with the Genlocks wasn't too bad. It was further away from the main group, so they never ran in. The room with Hurlocks was trickier, as one of the Hurlocks in the main group might randomly barge in and ruin the attempt. It would have been nice to whittle down the main group, but facing 3 Hurlocks in a tiny room was a death sentence. We eventually wedged ourselves against a shelf, creating a similar situation to the Mabari from our origin, where we could hit with dual weapon sweep, but they couldn't hit us, allowing us to clear out the second room. Taking down the main group took so many tries. There were 2 ballistae, and we could even use them while stealthed, so you'd think it'd go smoothly, but we could only hit one of the genlocks with the ballistae once. The hit would knock it back, and then we couldn't hit anything. I found no way of aiming the ballistae, and once we dropped stealth, we were better off using our bow. The Hurlocks ran in regardless of who we hit, but the genlocks only acted after we attacked them, so we dealt with the Hurlocks first. Saying it like that makes it sound easy, but it wasn't. Our opening shots usually amounted to nothing, and facing 3 Hurlocks in melee never ended well, so we had no choice but to lead them towards the stairs down to the first floor. If we hugged a scaffold on the left side of the room, they would get confused. We couldn't shoot without stepping into the open, as apparently this gap is solid, so we waited for them to target the idiots we were forced to bring along so we could pick off one Hurlock at a time while the others slashed at the meat bags. The successful attempt was an oddity, as our inept rogue momentarily figured out how to aim and took down a Hurlock with his bow. We've invested heavily in dexterity during our level ups and have 25, which is a respectable amount for this point in the game. Despite that, we missed with our bow more than we hit. Anyway, we got a string of lucky hits and only had to deal with 2 Hurlocks in melee, and we got them to target the meat bags so we could fight them individually. We still had to deal with the 4 genlocks too, because of course the game wouldn't let us drop out of combat to save and heal. We took down 1 without interference because it pursued us after we shot it, but the remaining 3 wouldn't move. 1 was far enough from the others to get into a shootout, but the last 2 were next to each other. Generally speaking, we're stronger in melee thanks to dual weapon sweep, dirty fighting, and below the belt, so we had to rush in and take out at least 1 of them. We were at about half health, so I decided to use one of our precious health potions, and our idiot rogue decided he was entitled to 2. Why? We were missing enough health to partially benefit from the second potion, but we can't afford to chug them like that. I briefly considered reloading, but we were so lucky at the start of this attempt that I figured we'd use 2 potions in most attempts anyway and rolled with it. We rushed down one of the genlocks at the cost of 2/3 of our health, hid until our abilities were off cooldown, and finished off the last one. Is that the end of the second floor? No! There's another group of genlocks waiting for us in the room with the stairs leading up to the 3rd floor, and I never got less than 4 of them to follow us upon opening the door. After several attempts, we resorted to using the scaffold to confuse them so they'd attack the meat bags again, and we finally made it to the 3rd floor after spending over an hour clearing the 2nd floor, bringing us to 3 hours total in this stupid tower. The 3rd floor finally broke us. Once again, we faced genlocks, which were happy to turn us into a porcupine from far further away than we could shoot them. In previous fights, we scraped by with a spot that broke their brains, but I couldn't find a spot here, and trust me, I tried. At best, we'd get 3 attacking the meat bags and still have 2 attacking us. We had no room to maneuver because if we got too close to the ones attacking the meat bags, they'd focus on us again. And if we ran to the far side of the room, we'd alert another genlock. Our meat bags weren't surviving long enough for us to take down the genlocks chasing us safely. After a bunch of attempts that went nowhere, I gave in and lowered the difficulty all the way to normal. Once we eliminated a few genlocks, we were able to cheese the 2 focused on the meat bags, who had lasted longer on this difficulty, and finally won. We had 1 HP and a dream, and the only meat bag left was the Mage, who was at half health, so I figure he had maybe 2 hits left in him if we were lucky. Thankfully, the last rooms of the 3rd floor were made significantly easier thanks to the Mabari we released from their kennels. Apparently, these ones hadn't been raised on a diet of elf ears and were happy to chew on the darkspawn instead of us. The ogre was eager to crush what was left of our dignity. We can't risk melee due to the ogre's grab. I've only escaped it by having a party member interrupt the ogre by freezing, stunning, or staggering it, and since we can't be helped by our meat bags, being grabbed is the end of the attempt. We have a couple ways of avoiding it. Dirty fighting, if initiated as soon as the grab text appears above the ogre, will stun the ogre as he picks us up, allowing us to free ourselves. Alternatively, running away prevents it from picking us up, as grab is one of the handful of abilities that check to see if they hit as the animation plays, granting us the luxury of moving out of the way. Basic attacks and mini abilities in Dragon Age Origins check for targets, if they hit, statuses, etc., when initiated, not when the animation plays. That's why the ogre's ram connects even if we've moved out of the way. As a kid, it confused the hell out of me. and while I now understand why it happens, I think determining hits before animations is unintuitive and looks downright glitchy if we're sent flying by an attack that was visually nowhere near us. It isn't even consistent. Our dual weapon sweep checks during the animation, so we have to consider enemies' movement, while below the belt hits solely based on dice even if we're visually kicking air. Also, giving the ogre high physical resistance tracks, but not high defense. It's huge, lumbering, and barely wearing anything, so how are we missing so often? Anyway, rant over, back to talking about how this ogre is eviscerating us. If it rams us, we're in trouble because we can't dodge it and it knocks us down. If it keeps ramming us, we can be trampled with no opportunity to heal. Due to its rank, pinning shot and dirty fighting barely do anything. Pinning shot I understand. Arrows are like splinters to this thing, so pinning it in place with one would be unlikely and short-lived at best. But why is throwing dirt in its eyes so ineffective? The stun is so short we can't get an attack or dual weapon sweep in safely. We noticed this as a mage as well. Our Winter's Grasp spell froze it for the blink of an eye on Nightmare, but we could cast Drain Life during those few frames of safety, whereas our rogue's attacks take too long. We tried poisons, but I didn't see even one extra damage. We tried to find a spot that broke the ogre's brain, but the closest we got was this spot between the wall and the railing around the stairs. While it would confuse the ogre briefly, the railing blocked most of our shots and the ogre figured out how to hit us through the stairwell. We could get it hung up on the meat bags long enough to slip a shot or two in, but they wouldn't last long. We got extremely lucky on one attempt and the ogre's brain broke on its own. It walked in place against one of the meat bags for a while, but eventually rammed the meat bag it was stuck on, knocking them away and freeing itself, and we didn't have enough potions to finish the job. The ogre getting stuck was such a fluke I knew I couldn't replicate it. I initially gave up and dropped the difficulty to casual, but that made the fight too easy. Our stuns were keeping him in place long enough to attack safely, and we did more damage, so we didn't have as many opportunities to mess up. I was worried it would make the rest of the run boring, so I loaded back, put it back on normal, and kept trying. I had to stop for the night and come back the next day, but we defeated the ogre on normal. While the meatbags were alive, we used them to trip up the ogre so we could get a safe shot or two. On the rare occasion pinning shot hit and pinned, we could take a couple more shots, but it was far from consistent. If the ogre opened the fight by hurling a rock at the meatbags, it was a reset because it sent them flying away from each other, making it harder to get the ogre hung up on them. They'd be moved anyway by massive attacks and rams, but the longer they were together, the better. We could order them to move, but I felt bad for letting them help by tripping up the ogre, and moving them to make that easier seemed like a step too far. Ideally, we'd get the ogre to half health before the meatbags went down, but if we took at least a third of its health off, it was worth continuing. Once they were down, we'd stun the ogre with dirty fighting and throw one of the 5 acid flasks we'd looted along the way. Each one did about 50 damage, which was equivalent to 5 or 6 shots from our bow. After they were gone, we had 2 options. 1, stun the ogre with dirty fighting and use pinning shot. If pinning shot were dependable, this would have been the way to go because when it hit, it would either stop the ogre or slow it down enough for us to get out of the way, but we missed so often it wasn't worth it. Leaving our second option. Stun the ogre with dirty fighting, follow up with dual weapon sweep, and run for our lives. We'd almost always get hit, but would reliably inflict about 20 damage since sweeps are auto hits. And sometimes we'd get lucky and the ogre would go for a grab, which we could barely back away from after the sweep, or it'd go for a basic attack and miss. What we didn't want to see was ram because it always hit and took half our health. However, we weren't knocked down long enough to be caught again most of the time, unlike our mage on Nightmare where it was a distressingly common occurrence. The bandits in Lothering aren't bad this time around because we spread them out by triggering the conversation about the treaties and the conversation with the merchant and priestess. We got them to compromise mid-combat. We demand the bandit leader turn over what he stole, getting us money and more XP than if we'd just executed him. It often isn't clear how much XP we get for interactions, but the wiki has breakdowns of rewards and I've noticed something odd. In most RPGs I've played, taking less money grants more XP. However, harsher choices in Dragon Age Origins tend to give more money and XP. In this case, we get 150 XP for demanding the items that we otherwise wouldn't have gotten. We get another 150 XP for resolving the situation. We'd get this for most outcomes other than ignoring them, plus the XP for slaying them. I mean, they're bandits, so it's what I would have done anyway, but if I notice situations like this, I'll mention them. Also, set bonuses are a thing. I thought they were limited to the Drake, Dragon Scale, Effort, and Diligence sets, but no, there's a set bonus for every armor, and it's only communicated to the player by this little icon. Sadly, it doesn't say what the bonus is. If we hover over it, it says item set bonus, and if we bring up the details, it oh so helpfully repeats that with no additional info. Great UI design. I even checked the codex. I know the wiki exists, but they had tooltips and a codex, and they couldn't describe the set bonuses in either place. Anyway, we fight Loghain's soldiers in the tavern alongside Leliana. She's not a party member here, so she's allowed to help, but we turned down her offer to join us. Repeatedly. We also reach level 7 and get our first specialization point. I figured it'd be useless for a bit because we didn't unlock rogue specializations during our mage run, and I swear up, down, and sideways I haven't played Dragon Age Origins on this account other than the mage run, but somehow assassin, bard, and ranger are unlocked. So I guess we're talking about specializations now. I went ham over analyzing our options, so if you don't care to take an in-depth look at the sadness that is rogue specializations in Dragon Age Origins, I made it its own chapter so you can easily skip it and pop in when I say which ones we'll take. Also, editing Luna. That's your reminder to place chapter markers as you're editing. Ranger has the worst bonuses, 1 Constitution and 5 Nature Resistance. Their wolves also don't use several of their abilities for some asinine reason. This can be circumvented on PC by clicking a pop-up to access their tactics. I don't know if I'd allow that or not, but the pop-up isn't clickable on consoles, so it's a moot point. Also, while I personally consider pets an extension of our character and thus allowed, I anticipate disagreement on that. Between that, the terrible innate bonus, and my worry about the pets being weak, we're not considering Ranger at all. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Bard works best with a party. Its bonus of 1 cunning and 2 willpower is okay. Song of Valor frankly seems poor even with a party. Maybe a rogue and 3 mages could use the extra regen, but short of that, the wiki goes so far as to say it will likely be of no benefit for the rogue because a fight would have to last 2 minutes for a rogue with 40 cunning to regenerate enough stamina to offset its upkeep. Distraction inflicts a -5 attack and defense penalty to 1 target for 5 seconds. So it's basically nothing because it's so short, and we can't use Captivating Song because we'd be unable to act while singing it. The attack damage and critical chance from Song of Courage are nice, but are they worth a specialization in 3 talents? Maybe, but frankly only because the other specializations have problems too. Assassin's Mark of Death suffers for the lack of a party, but it still increases our damage, so it's not useless. What I'm most interested in is Exploit Weakness, which adds damage to backstabs based on our cunning. Admittedly, Song of Courage adds cunning-based damage to all attacks, not just backstabs, and actually gives a larger bonus at 26 cunning or lower because its formula includes a flat 2 points that Exploit Weaknesses doesn't, plus bonuses to attack and crit chance. But Exploit Weaknesses damage scales far better than Song of Courage's above 26 cunning. Lacerate would be great, but according to the wiki, it's bugged and does nothing, and unless we have severe stamina issues, Feast of the Fallen isn't good enough to effectively justify costing 2 talent points, since we'd have to take Lacerate, which does nothing, to get it, leaving Assassin in a tricky spot overall. Its bonuses look good, 2 dexterity and 2.5% melee critical chance, but critical chance actually doesn't work well with Assassin or Duelist. We'll go over why in a moment. Duelist grants the best bonuses, 2 dexterity and 1 damage, and dueling plus keen defense would grant us plus 10 attack and defense. For comparison, we'd need 80 cunning for Song of Courage to give us 10 attack, and it'd provide no defense, but would grant more than enough damage to beat Duelist's innate bonus even with low cunning. Upset Balance inflicts penalties similar to Below the Belt, but with no damage. It has the same casting time, duration, and stamina cost, so I've always found Below the Belt better, making Upset Balance situational at best. Duelist's 4th talent, Pinpoint Strike, makes all attacks criticals for 15 seconds. These auto-crits can trigger when criticals would normally be impossible, such as when rapid shot or dual striking are active. But oddly, to take full advantage of this, we want our normal critical chance to be low, as normal crits will still be prevented by those modes. Crits also don't stack with backstabs, so if we have exploit weakness, which requires backstabs, pinpoint strikes will be of limited use. Do you see why I was confused about Assassin increasing melee critical chance when its talents emphasize backstabs now? As far as I can tell, there's no such thing as a critical backstab in Dragon Age Origins. Backstabs are essentially auto-crits that can trigger effects normal crits can't. Pinpoint Strike also has a 3-minute cooldown, so we'd only be using it once in most fights unless we were willing to sit around in stealth. Here are the combinations available to us without Ranger. Assassin Bard. We'd have all the backstab damage thanks to Song of Courage plus Exploit Weakness, but lower attack and defense than the other combos. It'd take 5 talents to get everything we want by level 16. Assassin Duelist. While this combo doesn't hit as hard as the Bard Assassin, it has more attack and defense. We could get everything at level 16 for 6 talents. Bard Duelist. While this combo provides the best attack and defense and the best consistent damage without backstabbing, maintaining Song of Courage and dueling would tie up a large chunk of stamina. If we added dual striking or rapid shot on top of that to make better use of Pinpoint Strike, we'd have very little stamina left to do anything besides basic attacks. It also needs 7 talents, making it the most talent-hungry combo, and it's the most reliant on Pinpoint Strike, which we can't get until level 16 even if we take Duelist first, plus the 3-minute cooldown. Overanalyzing done, and welcome back to anyone who didn't sit through it. Here's the quick version. We'll either be an Assassin Bard or an Assassin Duelist depending on how useful I think the defense from Duelist will be, and how much I feel like relying on Pinpoint Strikes. For now, we're picking Assassin, and we'll get Bard or Duelist at level 14. Back outside, we use Herbalism to help Elder Miriam, but we can't do Allison's quest since we don't have trap making. We also unlock Sten's Cage for XP, but leave him behind. It takes a while to clear out the bandits and wildlife around Lothering for the Chanter's board, but none of the fights were particularly difficult. Having room to initiate combat from a distance makes all the difference after that damn tower. We're coming up on our first visit to camp, so we need to make sure we have enough money to purchase a talent tome from the camp merchant, Bodane. We must buy it now because after we leave the first time, and only the first time, Bodane's inventory is reset, so we can potentially get 2 of every item he's carrying by buying one before the reset and another afterwards. This may be considered an exploit because the devs may not have intended for us to be able to buy 2 tomes, but I'm okay with it because we have to pay for both tomes. To me, that makes it as valid as befriending the Dalish so we can purchase items from Varathorn later, but I figured it was worth covering so you knew how we got the extra tome. To be clear, we will not use item duplication to get more tomes. Also, while we're going over budgets, now's as good a time as any to explain how stealing affects the run. Any character with the first rank of stealing can attempt to steal from any target that isn't in combat, and each rank counts as 5 extra cunning when determining if a stealing attempt succeeds. Each rank of stealth also gives 5 extra points if we're stealth during the attempt. Since we plan to invest in cunning and stealth, the first rank of stealing might get us by. With that in mind, we'll either stop at rank 1 or get all the way to rank 4 if we want to steal in combat. Consequences for failed attempts largely depend on where we're caught and range from flavor text to catastrophe. So in certain areas, we won't be stealing unless it's something we really want or we've already done everything we could be locked out of. The one area we will not steal is in the Dalish camp, as failures there will permanently prevent us from trading with Varathorn, the only infinite source of elf root. Now that the game has finally opened up, where should we go? We probably should have gone to Denerim to pick up side quests and the Archivist's Sash for extra XP from Codex entries, but I thought the Sash was in Orzammar. We also need to get all the Codex entries in Orzammar to get the key to the city, one of the accessories we need to boost our strength, so we went that way. Just getting there in one piece came down to dumb luck, as most random encounters the game was hellbent on rolling were instant reloads. The most common one was a battle against the Hurlock Alpha, 2 Genlocks, and a Hurlock Emissary in a small open area. There was no cover, no spots that broke their brains, and no room to separate them, so you can imagine how that went. Leaving camp stealth meant we'd enter the fight stealthed, but it didn't amount to much. One more level and we'll take combat stealth. But until then, running into this encounter is a reset. The second encounter the game kept giving us, the twisted path with tons of bandits and traps, might have been survivable, but we can't disarm the traps yet. According to the wiki, they require a disarm score of 50. Each rank of the lockpicking talent increases disarm by 10, and each point of cunning increases it by 1. We could get our disarm score to 40-something with the talent tome from Bodane, but that won't cut it, and even if we had 2 talent points, the third rank of lockpicking is locked behind, say it with me, level 8! We also want lethality and combat stealth first, so it'll be a while before we can invest in lockpicking, and thus a while before we can complete the twisted path without skipping the XP for disarming the traps. Either that or we're going to have to get our cunning all the way to 40. We need XP, and we aren't getting it by sitting around camp, so how did we get to the Frostback Mountains if both of these encounters were causing us problems? We kept trying until the game took pity and had us run into old Tegrin. Thankfully, his encounter is repeatable, so we can save scum for him if we have to travel without combat again. It isn't a fun process, though, so I decided to try to reach level 8 before traveling so we could hopefully at least beat the Band of Darkspawn. There were plenty of combatants between us and the city gates, 2 groups of Logain's thugs and 1 deserter from the Blackstone Irregulars, but they were strong groups with mages, so how could we beat them? We tried attacking the mage in the first group from stealth, but we couldn't take them out fast enough. Then we tried luring them away, and that sort of worked. We only had to deal with 2 melee units, but it required a lot of potions. Then we shot at the last melee unit, and an archer popped out of thin air to join him. We could beat them, but I doubt I need to explain how unsustainable this level of potion use is. Then we blundered into our old friend, a spot that broke our opponent's brains. It's on the path near where we entered the region, near 3 small trees with a large tree and some mossy rocks behind them. We can climb up behind the large tree and foes won't close in. Unfortunately, we can't shoot or use targeted abilities like dirty fighting, or the game will freak out and teleport us to the other side of the rocks where enemies can reach us, but we can use dual weapon sweep. I swear that talent has carried this run so far. The mages were tricky even with the help of our new favorite spot. Thankfully, we fought the one with lightning spells alone because she might have been able to hit us with those regardless of where we were. The healing mage was cheesable from that spot, but it took a while. He kept running hither and thither looking for a way to attack us and healing himself. We could barely outdamage his healing, and we had to be careful not to miss with dual weapon sweep, while also not moving out far enough for the 2 melee units with him to attack us. Logain's mouthpiece was easy enough to take down after the mage was gone, but the Kunari bodyguard hardly took any damage from our sweep. This might have been a rare occasion where Deadly Strike, a slow single target attack with an armor penetration bonus we only took because it's a prerequisite for lethality, might have been useful, but using it would teleport us out of our spot, so it wasn't an option. So we sat here for half an hour chipping away at him with dual weapon sweep while I worked on the script. Now that we're in Orzammar, we wrangle nugs, convince the shape rate to allow Chantry to open, and play both sides of the succession feud. We're ultimately going to side with Balin because his quests give more XP, but we convinced Haramon's fighters to enter the provings for funsies by stealing love letters and passing a speech check. No idea if they'll appear when we enter the provings for Balin later, so that'll be fun to find out. With that done, we head out into the deep roads to find Lord Dace so he'll change his house's vote based on forged papers from Balin's right-hand man, Vartag Gaborn. I don't think I need to describe the combat. We're facing Hurlocks and Ginlocks, and fights against them haven't changed. Thankfully, the tunnels are long enough for us to split enemies off from groups for the most part, although there were exceptions where we had to fall back on consumables, including poisons. Deathroot extract was slightly useful against emissaries. The Hurlock emissary was particularly nasty. Hurlocks have more health than Ginlocks on average, and this held true for the emissaries, making it very difficult for us to take down the Hurlock emissary before it cast Curse of Mortality, a spell that prevents us from healing and does a fair amount of spirit damage. If it cast that, that was the end of the attempt, so we needed lucky stuns from Deathroot extract to buy time. On top of that, there was a Hurlock we weren't able to lure away, so it hit us the whole time, and we nearly lost the winning attempt when it knocked us down with a shield mash while the emissary had a sliver of health left. That battle got us to level 8, and we had the talent tome kicking around, so we used it and our level up talent to get combat stealth and lethality. I saved first in case combat stealth was useless, but going by how it performed against the rest of the foes, it is everything we hoped it would be, especially for splitting up groups. It isn't perfect, however. Enemies start healing immediately when we enter stealth, but we don't start healing until we drop out of combat. We also can't use it against bosses yet. Once we have the 4th rank of stealth, we'll be able to hide near most bosses, although the strongest ones like the Archdemon will still prevent us from hiding, and the issue with enemies healing after we hide will still be there. I considered entering the Provings, but I want to get the Archivist Sash so we can come back, get the Codexes, and get the key to the city, which means we're heading to Denerim. Of course, we run into Old Tegrin on our first trip now that we might be able to handle the other encounters. We bought his skill tome and used it to get rank 3 coercion. A lot of the side quests in Denerim lack combat, and even the back alley gangs only take a few tries, which for this warden means they were a breeze. We complete side quests until we run into the random encounter with a revenant phylactery. Unlike the one in Orzammar, this one can only be encountered once. We don't need to fight it, but I'd like to attempt it at a more reasonable level later, so our only option was to load back to before we got the encounter and leave Denerim. We also saved refugees from the Darkspawn, which wouldn't have been noteworthy except for the Hurlock Emissary boss. We picked off the minions easily enough, but taking down the Emissary was almost more than we could handle even with lucky Deathroot extract stuns. The best attempts would get it to about 25% health, and then it'd cast Curse of Mortality and doom us. Whoever came up with that particular spell, I hope Legos spontaneously appear beneath your feet. Even without it, this emissary was terrifying. If we stayed at range, it happily incinerated us with fireballs and lightning. We eventually got past it by luring it over to the last 2 refugees and hiding, which we can only do when the emissary is very far away because of its boss rank, so it wasted a ton of spells on them. Even that took several tries to work, and I'm not sure why the winning attempt went differently. Maybe the emissary used so many spells on the refugees that it ran low on mana, or maybe it was sheer dumb luck, but we got past it. After that, we returned to Orzammar, and the XP from the codexes around the city was enough to push us to level 9. Combined with the cunning from the key to the city, we now have a high enough disarm score to handle the traps and the 2 random encounters we keep having to save scum around when traveling on the world map. Yeah, the Darkspawn group has traps too that also require a disarm score of 50. We couldn't even see those until recently. Hopefully, we'll be able to finally clear them out. Remember when I said we didn't need Old Tegrin? Yeah, I was wrong. Until just now, we still needed him. Found that out on the way back to Orzammar, and considering those 2 random encounters, the Band of Darkspawn with a bunch of bear traps, and the bandits on the Twisted Path, are ones that are commonly run into right after Lothering, why the hiffle are the trap disarm scores for them so friggin' high? I know we don't have to disarm the traps, but why even let rogues disarm them if the early encounters are damn near impossible to handle? We run into the Darkspawn band that has been giving us fits and take them down, so that's progress. We probably could have handled them at level 8 with combat stealth, but it took until level 9 to disarm the traps scattered around the field. Those traps gave us 360 XP, which is more than we get for most side quests, so it was worth the wait in my book. Once we had the key to the city, I decided to head to the Provings for what I thought would be easy XP. Turns out that was true for most matches, but not the one against Piatin. I made the mistake of comparing our rogue to our mage again. Our mage had an easy time with this fight, but our rogue is pathetic. We can't use stealth because the fight starts after a cutscene, which prevents us from starting the battle hidden, and Piatin is a boss, so we can't hide after the fight starts. If we get stunned by the archer or one of Piatin's shield bashes, we're dead. If we stand and fight for 2 seconds, we're dead. If the pathfinding goes a bit janky, as it is wont to do, we're dead. See the pattern here? We can't survive long enough to do anything. I hear the chorus of invest in Constitution, and trust me, I would if that would help, but each point of Constitution only gives 5 health, and we're taking 20 plus damage from most attacks here, so we'd need to dump 2 levels worth of attributes into Constitution to survive 1 additional hit. It isn't worth the dexterity and cunning we'd have to give up. After many tries, and coming the closest I've gotten to punching something in years, we didn't get anywhere. The best I came up with was buying the freeze bomb recipe so we could toss a freeze bomb and an acid flask back to back. We couldn't toss 2 acid flasks in rapid succession because each type of grenade has its own cooldown, so we needed different types of bombs, and the freeze bomb recipe was in Orzammar. The 2 grenades took out the archer and one of the melee fighters, which I thought would give us a chance, but with the damage coming our way, I suspect Peaton would be more than capable of pulverizing us on his own. One shield assault from him and we're toast. Scorched toast! Also, to game devs who put pointless conversations before battles, why? It's clear we aren't beating this now, at least not on normal, and I'm reluctant to drop the difficulty when there are other things we could do. Thankfully, they'll pause the provings for us so we can keep our progress. We also purchased a talent tome on the way out. As for what might help us beat Peaton, maybe the 4th rank of stealth at level 12 so we could hide? It's possible I'm severely messing up, but if so, I can't figure out what we're doing wrong, never mind how to fix it. I'm hoping things will somehow come together with levels in gear because I'm not seeing any more magic bullets now that we have combat stealth. We don't have any specialization talents yet, but none of them appear game-changing at first glance. There are also talents on the dual-wielding and archery trees that'll help, but they'll mostly give us more stuns. Don't get me wrong, more stuns will be nice, but they won't give us new damage or crowd control types, so if an enemy is resistant or immune to what we already have, those talents won't change anything. For now, we're heading to Honnleath for the Harvest Festival ring. The Helm of Honnleath will also be nice, but we'll need 20 strength to equip it. We handled the Darkspawn in Honnleath Village easily enough. Most are weak, with the exception of a Hurlock Alpha we had to pay a bit more attention to. Most of the Darkspawn inside Wilhelm's Cellar are also easy to deal with individually, but we had less room to work with, so we often faced 2 or 3 at once, which we can only manage without chugging potions if we're careful. The Genlock Emissary was a pain because he had Curse of Mortality. At this point, I'm going to assume every Darkspawn mage has that damn spell, but we were able to survive it as long as we had at least half our health when it was put on us and we immediately ran away. It took a couple tries, but we took the Emissary out without poisons or grenades. Running away caused some strange behavior with the cutscene with the villagers behind the barrier, and I was worried we'd bugged it out, but it turns out a Genlock had gotten stuck behind the barrier. Thankfully, we could melee him, and once we took him down, the cutscene played. I don't know this for certain, but I suspect the mages are imprisoned in the nearest circle thing was more lax and got rewritten at a late stage of development, because court mages aren't a thing anywhere else in the game as far as I can remember, and yet a mage openly lived in this village, in a tower no less, as Redcliffe's court mage, and had a family. Were mages not tragic enough with the demonic possession risk and blood magic? They doubled down on mages being prisoners for life in later games, so expect to hear more when we get to them. But as it stands, the only explanation I've got is mages' treatment varies by region, and Ferelden is way more relaxed than most. Anyway, we need to clear out the shades and dust rays in the old laboratory to obtain the Harvest Festival ring, and we'll have to remove a Desire Demon to get the Helm of Honnleath. The lesser shades are easy to banish, but the Dust Wraith isn't. Like Gazareth, the Dust Wraith is immune to stun, so most of our crowd control doesn't work. We also miss a lot. We have 31 dexterity, 16 strength, and plus 10 attack from the Fencer's Cinch and the borrowed longsword we got from Duncan all the way back in our origin, by the way. We eventually brute forced the Dust Wraith with dual striking and a bunch of potions, although dual striking might have been more hindrance than help. In theory, it doubles our attacks by allowing us to attack with both weapons during each animation at the cost of preventing criticals, but in practice there are 2 issues that significantly worsen this. First, the offhand weapon's attack speed is disregarded. This can be turned into an advantage with the dual weapon mastery talent, which allows all one-handed weapons to be used in the offhand instead of just daggers, by equipping a slow weapon in our offhand and a fast one in our main hand. Without that, however, we're stuck with our longsword's attack speed even though we have a dagger in our offhand. According to the wiki, this results in an attack speed loss of roughly 40%. I don't know if that 40% is additive or multiplicative, meaning we could have 160 or 120% attacks compared to without dual striking. It'll be a non-issue once we have dual daggers, but there's another problem. One of the 3 attack animations used when dual striking doesn't have attack rolls assigned to it, so 1 out of 3 attacks always miss. Beautiful! There are so many bugs, Dragonage Origins may as well be an honorary Bethesda game. Apparently, dual striking still generates 33% more attacks on average, according to the wiki, assuming the faster weapon is in the main hand. With the slowdown from our longsword, it works out to either 79% if the 40% attack speed loss was multiplicative, or 105% if it was additive, so our attack speed is either worse or barely better, and we're giving up criticals. No thanks! Moving on, we have to take down a Desire Demon masquerading as a cat. She reanimates 4 corpses, but they're weak, which is good because she has 3 spells that can lock us down. Winter's Grasp, Cone of Cold, and Horror. Luckily, the AI is as dumb as a box of rocks and doesn't usually space abilities out, resulting in her burning all 3 in quick succession most of the time instead of cycling through them to keep us stuck. She still took a few tries because she kept hitting us with them when the corpses were still up and they swarmed us, but once they were down, we could handle being stuck for a bit as long as we kept our health topped up. I don't want to head to Redcliffe or the Circle yet because once we enter those areas, we'll be locked in and I don't want to risk partially completing them only to have to load back and lose a bunch of progress because we hit a wall. I'm not eager to visit the Brazilian Forest either, as many enemies there have Overwhelm, an auto-hit melee ability that pins down and eviscerates a single humanoid. It was a pain in the rear for our mage, and I even considered shapeshifting to negate it. That's not an option this time, and we've already gotten a taste of the agony that awaits us the handful of times we fought wolves or Mabari. I also don't want to progress the main quest in Orzammar because I'm worried doing so will end the provings, so that leaves side quests and random encounters. I won't go over this in depth as it's fairly boring, mostly talking to people and minor battles that don't amount to much even for a solo character. Do we have to retry some fights? Yes, several in fact. But always due to issues we've already covered, and getting past them comes down to executing some combination of strategies we've already discussed. Splitting foes up, weapon switching cheese, combat stealth, or throwing dirt in the enemy's eyes and taking them to Dick Kick City so we can turn them into pincushions as they hobble after us. Or, backstabs. There's also Death Root Extract, grenades, and potions, but we only use them when absolutely necessary because we're trying to save up for gear. The only fight of any note was against the leader of a nest of blood mages in Denerim, and frankly some of the fights on the way to him took more tries than he did. That may be surprising to anyone who's seen the Mage run, which had trouble against him, but our rogue only took 2 attempts. Granted, we chugged tons of potions and used Death Root Extract hoping for lucky stuns, but we did good damage so we didn't have to last long. I guess he handles spells better than being stabbed. A shock salve probably would have saved some potions, but I didn't think of that until I was writing this. Whoops. We attempted the shadier proving matches as well, but they went horrifically. Even with acid and freezed grenades, it took several tries to slay the blood mage in the first match. Our mage also had trouble with her, but took down the melee fighters easily with the Cone of Cold spell after she was down. Sadly, our rogue has no AoE crowd control. Despite their name, freeze bombs can't freeze targets, so the melee fighters promptly turn us into strawberry jam. Okay game, if you're gonna be cheap, I'll pull the cheapest BS I can think of. First we need acid, fire, shock, and soul rot grenade recipes. The shock one is at the Wonders of Thetis and shop in Denerim, so it's simple to obtain. The fire one is sold by the quartermaster in the Circle Tower. Thankfully, we can enter the lobby to get to him without being locked in the tower. The remaining recipes are sold by Verathorn, the craftsman in the Dalish camp, and we don't have to face werewolves to reach him. However, he only had the acid flask recipe. The wiki claims the soul rot bomb recipe is in his initial inventory, so we shouldn't have to do 3 main quests to unlock it, but maybe it's wrong or it was changed on console. We'll check again after we complete 3 main quests. Still, we can now make acid flasks instead of relying on loot RNG, and we have fire and shock bombs in our repertoire, allowing us to quickly toss up to 4 grenades from stealth. The quick part is crucial, as enemies heal rapidly while we're stealth. Even tossing grenades at them doesn't make them enter combat and stop healing, although they follow us around like lost ducklings, so we have to either toss enough grenades in rapid succession to blow them to smithereens, or we have to break stealth and follow up with other attacks to get them in combat to prevent them from healing. We could toss a round of grenades, drop stealth, and then run around to keep our opponents in combat until we can stealth again and toss more grenades, but we'll likely take hits each time we break stealth because enemies will be on top of us due to their duckling routine, so the fewer times we have to do that, the better. Only acid flasks have unlimited ingredients available, so the others will be saved for tough fights. We also buy a set of Dalish armor from Varathorn. The Dalish set grants solid dexterity and defense bonuses, so I expect this will be our armor until we get a set from Wade. While we're in the Dalish camp, we can complete the Cammon's Lament side quest. To sum up a lot of soap opera melodrama, Cammon must hunt alone and bring back a pelt as proof to be considered a hunter, so Gaina will accept his proposal. But the Keeper has understandably forbidden the clan from entering the werewolf-infested forest. We can stick our noses into these very personal affairs for XP because we're an RPG protagonist and that's what we do. Finishing nature of the beast in any way that leaves the Dalish alive allows Cammon to hunt, but we don't get a reward, so it's more like missing his quest than completing it. The most obvious rewarding resolutions are to convince Gaina to accept an early proposal given the circumstances, give Cammon a wolf pelt and convince him to say he hunted it himself, or break them up via dialogue. These resolutions are available to all wardens and grant 250 XP and a book with a codex entry for a total of 325 XP with the Archivist sash. Not bad for what often amounts to one conversation. If those were the only resolutions, I wouldn't have mentioned it, but there are two other options. Female wardens can seduce Cammon, but this only grants 100 XP with no book, resulting in another XP drop due to the loss of the codex entry. Male wardens, however, can seduce Gaina for 500 XP and the book, nearly doubling their XP. Any method that breaks Cammon and Gaina up, especially seduction, will earn the clan's ire and results in Varathorn refusing to trade, so that part at least is fair, but why the hiffle do male wardens get nearly double XP for seduction, while female wardens get their XP cut by 2/3 for it? Personally, I think both seductions should give reduced XP because it's a needlessly cruel thing to do, but I'd shut up if they were equal. For anyone wondering, we resolved the quest by giving Cammon a wolf pelt. We entered the forest to get the pelt because I forgot to keep one from the wilds, and I decided to see how much we could clear without too many retries. The defense bonuses from our Dalish armor helped us dodge most attacks, but we took a couple unlucky hits from a great bear and keeled over. Considering another great bear mauled us with overwhelm, I guess we just got lucky that this one didn't use it. Neither did the wolves or werewolves in the western forest, but the ones in the eastern forest sure did. We turned around once that started. Sylvan's Roots ability was also an unavoidable potion tax since it auto-hits. I'm dreading returning here because I have no idea what we'll do against the shadow werewolves that spam overwhelm or the arcane horror or Zathrian, but that's future Luna's problem. In the meantime, we returned to Orzammar to try the shady proving matches. It took a few tries and lots of grenades, but we beat them. Since we're running out of tasks and Redcliffe has the easiest combat, I guess we're heading there next. We arrive in Redcliffe to find them preparing for an attack from a horde of undead stemming from the castle. If we don't stick around to fend them off, the village will be lost, so we're stuck here for the moment. Our first priority is helping the militia, as their segment of the battle was hard on our mage, and I anticipate it being rough this time around too. Step 1 is convincing the blacksmith, Owen, to help with the repairs. So, remember when I said one of the weapons we want is Farsong? Yeah, about that. It only appears in the inventory of Redcliffe's replacement blacksmith, so we need to make sure Owen takes an early retirement. However, we also want his help with the militia, so we can't send him to the farm now. Instead, we must intentionally fail to find his daughter, Velena, when we enter the castle, resulting in her death and Owen's out of grief. Do I feel awful about this? Yes. Is it hypocritical of me to do this after calling the Camen's Lament seductions needlessly cruel? Also, yes, but the devs consistently put the best rewards behind awful outcomes. The only bow that's comparable is Falandin's Reach, but it lacks the plus 3% critical chance, plus 10% critical damage, and plus 10 attack of Farsong. We'd also have to make it into the Elven Ruins in the Brazilian Forest and slay a dragon for it, so there's that too. That being said, Falandin's Reach is also free in both the monetary and guilt sense, and considering we're also looking to purchase a lot of other tomes and gear, will we even be able to afford Farsong? Let's do some math to see if we can find a way to justify saving Owen and Velena's lives. We need 30 sovereigns for consumables and crafting ingredients, 35 sovereigns for skill tomes, 64 sovereigns for talent tomes, 33 sovereigns for attribute tomes, 30 sovereigns to commission superior drakeskin armor from Wade, 106 sovereigns for Andruil's Blessing, 89 sovereigns for the Felon's Coat, 88 sovereigns for the Spell Ward necklace, 149 sovereigns for the Rose's Thorn, and 121 sovereigns for Farsong. We'd need 745 sovereigns to afford it all. And yes, I'm rounding the prices up a little bit because I'm sure you all don't want to hear about how much silver and copper is involved in that. According to the wiki, we'll accumulate at least 350 sovereigns by the Landsmeet, the event that locks us into the endgame. And a warden that finishes all DLC and companion quests, gets the most money from quests, sells all unneeded gear, and steals at every opportunity can get, quote, over 1,000 sovereigns prior to the Landsmeet without making lyrium potions, end quote. We don't have the herbalism skill needed to craft potent lyrium potions, so no infinite money for us there, assuming I even allowed it. We also don't have rank 4 stealing, so we can't steal in combat, and it's not my first instinct to blackmail people, so we didn't demand money when returning the love letters to Haramont's fighter in the Provings. We also don't have most DLC, and we can't complete the one we do have without recruiting Shale, so we're missing out on them and most companion quests. I also haven't bothered with the Dwarven Merchant's Belt because swapping between the Archivist's Sash and the Fincher's Cinch is annoying enough already. Being a Dwarven Noble would have helped too, so put a pin in that for our warrior. 1,000 sovereigns is likely well out of reach thanks to all those factors, but we're doing all the quests we can sell more loot since we're solo instead of equipping a party of 4, and we've been stealing from most out-of-combat targets, so I'd say 500 sovereigns is a safe bet. What can we fit in that budget? The talent tomes and consumables are non-negotiable. Attribute tomes, however, only give 1 attribute point, and we may skip the 2 skill tomes that are still out in the wild as well. The rest are hard to give up, but we're still well over budget, and skipping Farsong makes sense considering Falandin's Reach is comparable, whereas the next best dagger after Rose's Thorn is far worse. We could pass up the Felon's Coat instead, but I suspect it'll help us more than Farsong would. Congratulations, Owen. The merchants are gouging us hard enough for you to live. Having said all that, I absolutely don't mind taking the pig of a tavern keeper for all he's worth. We're now the owner of the tavern. Oh no, Lloyd is surrounded. Whatever shall we do? I say that like we had the power to save any of the militia. Sadly, all of them fall in this battle, and we have to fight off several waves of undead by ourselves. The undead are immune to acid flasks, and I don't want to waste our more limited elemental grenades, but they struggle to hit us thanks to our 99 defense, so we can stand and fight better than you might think given our rogue's poor performance in melee up to this point. Even so, we chugged about 20 potions to see us through the last part of the battle. But I didn't run up to the knights for 2 reasons. 1, any foes they destroyed wouldn't give us XP, and 2, we had to leave 1 corpse running around so we could loot the fallen enemies and militia. If we'd taken down the last one, the game would have skipped to the next morning and any loot we hadn't taken would be gone. We could have carried more, but the backpacks available after Ostagar cost 6 or 7 sovereigns, and there aren't many situations where loot disappears like this. We could have bought 2 backpacks from the Ostagar quartermaster for about 50 silver. We bought one, but apparently his inventory resets after completing the quests in the wilds, and I didn't know that until I looked up backpack prices, so we missed the second. The knights fared far better than the militia, although they didn't light the oil we told them to set up at the castle path on fire, so it hindered the undead less than it should have. The tavern's waitress, Bella, probably got the best deal. Her horrible boss bit the dust, and we let her buy the tavern from us when she turned over Lloyd's stash. We get through the castle shockingly easily. The shades that gave our mage trouble didn't slow our rogue down because stealth allowed us to split them up. The Mabari ripped our face off with Overwhelm. I hate that ability, but we were careful the second time round. The walking corpses weren't an issue, with the exception of devouring corpses that cast a life drain. The fight against Tegan also went better for our rogue since, once again, we were able to split them up with stealth. Sadly, our arrival is a mixed blessing as we cannot save Connor. During our mage run, I asked you all if non-mages should be allowed to save Connor since it requires us to play as Jowan, Irving, Wynn, or Morrigan in the Fade, despite later games allowing non-mages to enter the Fade by similar rituals. But apparently no one in Ferelden can do that, so here we are. The comments were split almost evenly, so I guess it's up to me, and I personally lean towards using other characters to save Connor being against the rules. The game does its best to change our mind, from Isolde screaming, ordering, and pleading, to Tegan mentioning the circle like a dungeon master not so subtly pointing out unexplored options. But we ignore them and pursue Connor into the castle's living quarters. If we speak to Connor, he's more mature about the whole situation than Isolde, and wants whatever solution stops him from hurting people, which makes me feel both better and worse, but of course the demon possessing him isn't going to lie down and die. She's similar to the one in Honnleath, but stronger, and has one additional ability, Cursed Dance. Cursed Dance wouldn't be that bad for a female warden, but males can't heal while the debuff is active, similar to Curse of Mortality. She also has Winter's Grasp, Horror, and Cone of Cold. The first attempt went nowhere, the second one was where I discovered Cursed Dance prevents us from healing, the third almost won, but we got stuck at a bad moment, and on the fourth I finally remembered the salves we're carrying. Salves substantially increase resistance to an element, and since the demon is mostly using ice spells, an ice salve increases our odds of surviving long enough to regain control when she freezes us. A spirit balm might have helped too, but we didn't need it. Once she's down to 2/3 health, she disappears and raises corpses, which were a welcome break. And when she's down to 1/3, she summons rage demons, which would have been a pain except we also have a greater warmth balm. They still did decent damage, so I'm glad I remembered the salves. With the demons subdued and Isolde knocked out, we do what we have to do. I feel horrible for Connor. He was a kid trying to help his father, and the adults in his life didn't get him the training he needed. However, I don't feel much sympathy for Isolde. Her actions were understandable, but also wildly selfish and irresponsible, and they resulted in this. In my opinion, this situation is the best argument for the existence of the Mage's Circle in the whole series. Mages need training, or stuff like this can be caused by one young mage who doesn't even understand the bargain they're signing. That being said, I think mages should be allowed to lead normal lives after their harrowing if they wish. The Templars have blood vials if they need to be tracked down. Also, the implications of SA, of mages, and Tranquil by Templars is not unrealistic, sadly, but deeply unpleasant and unnecessary. Also, stuff like that is probably a big part of the reason why people like Isolde don't want to send their kid to the Circle, you friggin' idiots. Alistair is not happy when we return to camp. I get it, but wasn't he a Templar in training? I don't think they go on Fade walks to save possessed mages, and it strikes me as odd he magically knows that was an option when it was never brought up to this party. One way involves Jowan using blood magic by sacrificing Isolde, so it isn't a happy ending, although I prefer it to killing Connor because at least the person who caused the mess pays for it. The best way is saving the Circle of Magi so they can perform the ritual with lyrium, but it's only brought up by a mage warden, Wynn, or Morrigan if they're present, which they clearly weren't. Tegan mentions the Circle too, but isn't certain if they can help. Fun fact, Oghren disapproves of all paths to some degree, so resolve this before getting him, I guess? Liliana and Wynn have a lot to say about it too. It's not that I don't think they should have opinions, it's that I think those opinions should change based on the information available to them. As far as this party knows, there are no other options because we didn't bring a mage along, and they've only been to the circle long enough to know it's currently on fire. It's also possible to create a situation where killing Connor is the only option by releasing or executing Jowen and annulling the Circle of Magi, which, I remind you, is overrun by demons, so annulment is a reasonable course of action to some of the same characters who complain about Connor. And the disapproval for killing Connor in that set of circumstances is the same as if we had blatantly ignored Wynn pointing at the saved circle that was ready to help. To me, their opinions not changing to reflect these circumstances makes it seem like their opinions aren't coming from them, they're coming from the devs who do know all the paths we could have taken, and they're punishing us for not taking the optimal one. Anyway, we need the Urn of Sacred Ashes to heal Eamon and finish things in Redcliffe, but we're not heading that way yet because I want to fight the High Dragon, and I think we'll need a few more levels to pull that off. We can wrap up more side quests now that we have access to Redcliffe, and we find ourselves on a battlefield as part of one of them. While the battle is already over, we have to contend with the wolves drawn by the bodies, which is far worse for us because wolves have overwhelm. Who came up with that ability? I have such sights to show you. Of course, they didn't use it on the attempt I recorded, but rest assured there were 3 attempts where they did, one of which got to the last wolf. Our mage struggled with wolves for the same reason, but had AoE crowd control like Cone of Cold and Mind Blast, so we could handle them a bit better. Our rogue has stealth to split them up and 2 melee range stuns plus pinning shot, so, we at least have some ways of dealing with them. I have no clue what our warrior will do. Open to suggestions, because right now my only ideas are tons of armor to tank it and whatever stuns warriors can get. Anyway, back to this run. Our rogue handled the boss level bear a lot better than our mage did thanks to our dirty fighting plus below the belt plus pinning shot combo. It's what we've been using against most tough melee foes for some time. Basically, we use our bow and pinning shot until they close in, then throw dirt in their face to stun them and kick them in the, the snout in this case, and that somehow works. This slows them down when the stun wears off, which buys us time to get another pinning shot in, and repeat. I considered below the belt to be a mostly useless prerequisite for lethality, with its only draw being that it's quick, but the movement speed penalty has proven incredibly useful. I'm hoping we'll have enough talents to eventually pick up Scattershot so we have a ranged stun to stack on top of this combo, but it requires 3 mostly useless prerequisites, so it's on hold for now. We also ran into the random encounter with the Revenant in Denerim again, and I decided to fight it because I was sick of loading back every time we ran into it. It mostly deals physical damage, so a salve wouldn't help much, and we couldn't play keep away with the below the belt and pinning shot because Revenants have pull and mass pull. It's also immune to nature damage and stuns, so our options were to chug potions like there was no tomorrow or spam our limited elemental grenades. I chose the former. It took tons of potions, but we got past it. This is the only enemy so far where the plus 10 attack and defense from Duelist might have helped, because it was missing us sometimes, but not as much as I'd like, and it's the only opponent we've consistently missed for quite a while. Once we're done with side quests, we return to Orzammar to hopefully get past the provings at long last. Peotin still isn't a cakewalk even with grenades. They help us get the weaker fighters out of the way and soften up Peotin's right hand so we can ambush him out of stealth with a riposte, but we still have Peotin to deal with. His shield gives him lots of defense against ranged attacks, which draws the stun, kick, shoot strategy out way longer, but doesn't completely counter it. That being said, most of our damage came from below the belt, so I hope his family isn't counting on him to continue their bloodline. Next, we have to remove Jarvia and her Carta. Our mage had tons of trouble here, in large part due to dwarves' inherent 10% spell resistance, but that doesn't protect them from being poked full of holes, so this is another section where our rogue fared better than our mage, at least until we reached Jarvia, who's either highly resistant to stuns or we got unlucky. Either way, we gave up on stunning her. Thankfully, she can't competently navigate her own room and got confused when we went through the gaps between the pillars and the braziers in either corner. It isn't as good as getting her stuck, but it lets us slip a dual weapon sweep in and run away while only taking one counterattack, and mostly discourages her from using her nastier abilities like Punisher and Flurry that can tear down our entire health bar in seconds. She summons more Carta members a couple times. People complained about enemies spawning out of nowhere in Dragon Age 2, like Dragon Age Origins didn't do the exact same thing. But they're nuisances with the exception of assassins, who can deal a fair bit of damage or put Mark of Death on us to increase Jarvia's already terrifying damage. It took a couple of attempts, and frankly we should have lost the winning one when Jarvia suddenly remembered her abilities and hit us with Punisher and Riposte back to back. By some miracle, the knockdown from Punisher threw us through the pillar brazier gap, and Jarvia went around the long way to reach us, giving us enough time to recover from the stun from Riposte and chug a potion and finish the fight. We also hit level 14, and while the attack and defense from Duelist would be nice, it wouldn't help much against the enemies that give us the most trouble, namely mages and animals with Overwhelm, which ignore defense. I know Pinpoint Strike is good with Rapid Shot or Dual Striking, but that would help for all of 15 seconds, and Pinpoint Strike has a 3-minute cooldown. I don't want to sit around stealth for minutes at a time waiting on that. Thus, we're picking Bard in a solo. Of course, that still isn't enough for the dwarves to pick a Sodding King, so we have to venture into the deep roads to find Branka. On the way, we run into Oghren, even if we're stealthed, and while we can, and do, give him the runaround during this conversation, he always joins us. We don't have to take him along yet, so we send him to hang out with Morrigan and Alistair at camp. The battles in Caridin's Cross are no different from the ones I've already described against Darkspawn, and for what it's worth, our rogue has become better against them. I would even go so far as to describe him as competent most of the time. We struggle against emissaries who appear to have added Misdirection Hex to their repertoire of spells that neuter us. Misdirection Hex turns all normal hits into misses and all crits into regular hits for its duration, and it lasts more than long enough to seal our fate if we stand and fight. Of course, they still have Curse of Mortality too. Other than that, there's a Deepstalker Matriarch and an Ogre Alpha, but we don't fight them until we've cleared out everything else, so we're free to run around chipping away at them with our Stun, Kick, Shoot strat. We also find a much-needed upgrade at long last. Can you believe we were still using the borrowed longsword Duncan gave us in our origin, when we find a Thorn of the Dead Gods? This is the only spot where we can obtain a Silverite one. Although if I'd realized how much faster we'd attack with 2 daggers, I might have used the lower tier one we pickpocketed from Lord Dace a while back. Going by the speed boost our backstabs got, I'm guessing they only consider the main hand weapon speed. Dual weapon sweep also seems a bit quicker, but I'm not certain about that. How many of you have been screaming at me to use a dagger, any dagger, in the main hand since Ostagar? You'd think I'd have at least tried it after learning about dual striking speed weirdness, but nope! Sorry about that. I'm glad we found a new dagger because the enemies in the Orton Tig are tougher than the ones in Caridin's Cross. There are tons of spiders, so if those upset you, this is your cue to skip until the time on screen. Otherwise, come with me to watch our rogue get poisoned, webbed, and mauled repeatedly. First and foremost, most spiders have Overwhelm. We can survive it if we have most of our health when it starts, and we aren't being hit by a bunch of other foes, or we're lucky enough to get another spider to web us and interrupt it, but it's fatal most of the time. Second, the poisonous spiders have Poison Spit, an auto-hit ranged ability that does a lot of nature damage over the course of a few seconds. We can't stealth when we have damage over time on us either, which is just the cherry on top of this shit sundae. All spiders are also immune to nature damage, so acid flasks don't work. Finally, they can web us, but typically this is more annoying than deadly since it doesn't last very long and they all tend to spam it at the start of combat instead of spacing them out to keep us locked down. The first encounter in the Orton Tig is a battle between spiders and Darkspawn. On one hand, it's nice that they're fighting each other. On the other, we don't get XP from anything we don't slay ourselves, so we retried a few times purely to get more XP and even used a fire grenade to kill steal the ogre from the spiders. The next obstacle we run into is the Fade Beast summoned by the Asunder quest. While the 25 sovereigns it offers for letting it go is tempting, I want the 120 XP for banishing it, and besides, I know you all want to see if we can fight it. It's easier than you might think considering how much trouble it gave our mage, largely because I remembered salves this time. The Fade Beast's worst attacks are its fire and ice bolts and crushing prison. The firebolt does a decent chunk of damage, followed by even more damage over time. The frostbolt lacks the damage over time but freezes us, and the crushing prison locks us down and deals spirit damage. Of course, the Fade Beast is usually punching us while all of that is going on, but thankfully its normal attacks don't hit too often. Oddly enough, we want to stay in melee range to encourage it to melee attack since we usually dodge those, but there was only one attempt where it didn't use any spells, and we had to use warmth, ice, and spirit bombs to survive the elemental damage. Also, we beat it more than once. In fact, I think we beat it 5 times, twice on normal and a few more times on casual. Why? Because we can't loot it. It wasn't even shiny until we saved and loaded the save we'd just made, and we still couldn't interact with it. I even tried restarting the console, but all that did was make the body disappear entirely. After it happened the second time, I said screw it and put the difficulty on casual until we finally got a win where we could loot it, then put it back on normal. We still loaded back one more time. Why? Because all we got was a potion. You know what? 120 XP isn't worth it. Give me my money and get out of my face, you friggin' glitch monster. If I say how the fight against the corrupted Spider Queen made me feel, I will get demonetized. So instead, I'll break this down point by point analytically. First and foremost, every single spider here has Overwhelm and Poison Spit, and the Queen will eviscerate us if she decides to use Overwhelm, which she did. A lot. My first response to foes that can one-shot with Overwhelm is to keep them at range, but that doesn't work either since, unlike lesser spiders, the Queen can absolutely spam Poison Spit and it stacks. We only have lesser nature salves, but even our mage, who happened to have a greater one, couldn't afford to stand around getting covered in Poison Spit for long. The Queen can be stunned, but she has a decent chance to resist it, and Dirty Fighting and Riposte have long cooldowns, so we have to run around for a while between uses, assuming she doesn't rip our face off with Overwhelm when they fail. So she can kill us fast at range and in melee, but that's not the end of our troubles, oh no. When the Queen hits certain health thresholds, she instantly webs us and summons corrupted spiders. Doesn't matter if she's stunned, because BioWare only follows rules when they feel like it. They're dangerous in their own right, and the longer we take to get rid of them, the more the Queen heals, because BioWare, in their infinite wisdom, set the Queen as out of combat until the corrupted spiders are dealt with. I lost count of how many waves she summoned, but given how much she healed each time, it's fair to say we had to deal 2 or 3 health bars worth of damage to the Queen. After she summoned spiders the second time, I gave up on preventing her healing and hid to disengage so we could save between waves. Did that let her heal more? Yes, but considering how many retries it took with these checkpoints, I suspect I'd still be stuck if I'd waited for the celestial alignment that would allow us to win in one continuous battle. Most of the attempts that made it to the next checkpoint did so due to one of 2 things: copious use of grenades, or the Queen's Overwhelm failing due to sheer dumb luck, allowing us to stand and melee her for a while it was on cooldown. It failed once because she used it while we were webbed, but there was at least one occasion where it failed for no apparent reason, and Overwhelm doesn't roll to hit, so I have no clue what happened. And no, it wasn't due to a stun, because we got a couple stuns as she lunged, and they didn't do jack. At this point, I'm going to assume it's because BioWare wouldn't know good game design if it buggered them up the backside. We had to leave and get more crafting materials about halfway through this mess, and spent about 12 sovereigns on Corruptor Agent, flasks, and elf root. Most of our remaining money went towards purchasing our new dagger, the Rose's Thorn from Garen. In addition to dealing more damage and all that good stuff, it gives us 2 dexterity, a small amount of health regen in combat, and significant bonuses to our critical chance and critical damage, which also raises our backstab damage since backstabs are essentially auto crits. We're now using it in our main hand and Thorn of the Dead Gods in our offhand. I'm not sure how much it helped, but it was my only idea, so here we are. In retrospect, purchasing Andril's Blessing for the extra nature resistance would have probably been the better move, but After using about half a dozen of each type of grenade, other than acid flasks, and more attempts lost to overwhelm than I care to count, we finally exterminated the queen at 4 a.m. and I went to bed to scream myself to sleep. Most fights leading to the Broodmother aren't bad. Our rogue has become shockingly good at tearing down alphas and emissaries as long as they don't have any particularly nasty allies. Even the boss Darkspawn, the ancient Darkspawn, and the Genlock Forgemaster don't cause any major issues, although we had to use potions. However, if emissaries have allies that lock us down, like corrupted spiders, and an emissary survives long enough to cast spells, we're done. Multiple emissaries are a hurdle for the same reason, but stealth allows us to split them. Now on to the Broodmother. I can't show much without YouTube freaking out, but thankfully it isn't an interesting fight. Once we remove her tentacles and minions, all she can do is spit at us. She can't spam it nearly as fast as the corrupted Spider Queen, so with a nature salve and potions, it's very survivable. However, I want to discuss why I don't like Broodmothers as a concept. If you don't want to hear it, skip to the time on screen. Still here? Then let the rant begin. When Darkspawn take captives, male captives are eaten. However, females are force-fed their own comrades, and it's heavily implied they're assaulted until they become Broodmothers and spend the rest of their existence birthing Darkspawn. I don't mind the body horror, although I think parts of the process are needlessly edgy. I mind the inequality. For one, it reinforces the myth that only women can be sexually assaulted. Also, once dwarves and Grey Wardens found out about Broodmothers and how they're created, do you think they'd allow biological females near Darkspawn regardless of fighting prowess? It's bad enough if the Fallen are a buffet for your enemy, but churning out more enemies is even worse. The likeliest response, in my opinion, would be to only allow biological males to fight Darkspawn, and I don't think I need to explain why I hate that. I'd have preferred they take inspiration from the Xenomorphs. Facehuggers are equal opportunity implanters, and if it could happen to anyone, there'd be no reason to limit who fights. It'd be more of a don't let them take you alive no matter what kind of situation. Anyway, rant over, and welcome back to anyone who skipped it. We've finally arrived at the Anvil of the Void. Shortly after we enter the area, Oghren appears out of thin air and forces his way into our party. As far as I know, there's no way to avoid this, so we tell him to wait and hold position to keep him as far from combat as possible. He'll teleport to us during cutscenes, so he might absorb a few hits, but he isn't wearing armor, so I doubt he'll withstand much. Getting past the Darkspawn and Golems on the way to the Spirit Forge took a few tries. There were lots of Darkspawn, and there wasn't enough time between waves to drop out of combat and heal. This might be a good time to mention we're locked in until we resolve things with the Anvil of the Void, and we're lower on elf roots than I'd like, so we're being stingier with potions than usual. The Golems past the Darkspawn were tricky in their own right. Unlike ogres, the giant boulder hurled by Golems is somehow heat-seeking, so if they do that, we will get hit unless we stealth before the boulder is in the air. Thankfully, they don't hurl boulders that often. They mostly did it at the start of combat and then forgot about it, even if we were far away. Their slam ability is also auto-hit, so we don't want to be in melee with them for any length of time if we can help it. We were able to get some golems stuck in this spot in the tunnel leading back to where we fought the Darkspawn, but others were able to pass through it just fine. We led them all the way back to where we'd fought the Darkspawn and ran around a barrier until we had enough of a lead to hit them with a pinning shot. While they'd often resist it, pinning shots still slows targets that resist, which usually bought us time for another attack. The Spirit Forge was tougher than I thought it'd be, considering we only have to fight one spirit at a time. That being said, if we hadn't been conserving potions, it would have been nothing. Take out a spirit, fire a bolt of energy at the stone face, repeat 7 more times. The fight against Branka, however, is far from nothing. While we have 2 weak golems helping us, Branka has 2 weak golems and 2 strong golems, so our golems don't last long. While we have them, we toss a lot of elemental grenades. Acid flasks don't work. They should have called these poison gas grenades instead of acid flasks, because a stone golem being immune to poison tracks, but not acid. But mechanically speaking, it's all nature damage, so here we are. Anyway, we use our other grenades until we're down to Branka, then it's back to the old stun, kick, shoot strategy. Granted, Branka almost always resists below the belt, which makes sense for several reasons, although mechanically it's just due to her high physical resistance. Despite that, we slowly whittle her down with kicks until she creates shadow clones. I'm still very confused as to how she can do that, or some of the other things that she does during this fight. Like, Master Smith is one thing. Some of this seems like flat-out magic, which dwarfs can't do. Anyway, thankfully, the clones go to a different part of the chamber than the real Branka when we stealth, so it's easy to separate her from them, but it does limit us to running around a small part of the room so the clones don't see us and rejoin the battle. Things get a bit dicey toward the end when Branka somehow causes rocks to fall from the ceiling that can apparently tell friend from foe because they don't hurt her, but we run in circles, healing off the occasional boulder to the brain until we finally finish her off. After Balin gives us our troops, we hand in a few side quests and just barely scrape together the gold for Andruil's Blessing, the last item we need to raise our strength to 20 so we can wear the gear we want, including the Helm of Honnleath that boosts our attributes and armor further. Andruil's Blessing also raises our other attributes, stamina regen, and physical and nature resistances. Like I said earlier, I wish we'd gotten it before fighting the Corrupted Spider Queen and the Brood Mother, since those are 2 of the most nature-heavy fights in the game. But that would have required either putting off the Rose's Thorn or wandering off to do something else, and I'm not even sure what we should do now because the paths in front of us seem painful. Option 1. We stick around the Circle Tower, which we had to return to in order to buy Andruil's Blessing from the Templar Quartermaster in the lobby, and try to sort this magical mess out. However, once we go through the door at the far end of the lobby, we're locked in until we take down the various mages, demons, and possessed Templars infesting the tower. I anticipate a lot of hard fights with tons of enemies with crowd control spells, and this time we don't have Mana Clash to flatten them. On top of that, we don't really want any equipment from here, so the main rewards are XP and gold, although the extra attributes from the Fade would be nice. Option 2, we make our way to Haven to find the Urn of Sacred Ashes. I suspect this will be a more tempting prospect for our warriors since they'll get a talent and the materials for heavier dragon armors, and possibly a specialization depending on which ones we end up wanting. For our rogue, however, the pickings are slim. We'll only get a skill point we don't really need, plus a few Drake scales, and obviously XP and gold. Option 3, we return to the Brazilian forest to untangle that snarl of fangs and claws. This may be the toughest of the remaining areas because many of the foes have Overwhelm, but it also has Fallon Din's Reach, the best bow available to us since we spared Owen. It's in the Elven Ruins, so we'll have to get pretty far, but we'll be able to leave with it even if we can't finish the area yet. Thankfully, getting through the Eastern Forest proves far easier than it was earlier. Between having a second melee stunning ability, Riposte, and higher damage, we can take down the werewolves outside the ruins before they use Overwhelm pretty consistently. The few Sylvans in our way are also less of a potion tax since we can now survive 3 routes instead of 2. We even take down the Revenants with the Juggernaut armor with minimal issues. While we can't use the Juggernaut set, it's worth lots of gold, and the Revenants and their skeletal minions are worth lots of XP. The Hermit had Misdirection Hex, Winter's Grasp, and Cone of Cold, but once the Hex wore off, we tore through him. As for the Elven Ruins, there was a nasty encounter with 4 poison spiders where, surprise, surprise, they spammed Web, Poison Spit, and Overwhelm, but I suspect you saw enough of that from the corrupted Spider Queen. I know I did. So suffice to say, we hid to split them up and reached the dragon, which was surprisingly easier to deal with. Don't get me wrong, she hit hard, and if she happened to stun us, which made her attacks far more likely to land because it removed our dexterity bonus to defense, she could rip us apart, which is how we lost the first attempt. However, her overwhelm never worked. She tried to use it at least twice, going by the text that appears when enemies use abilities, but neither landed. I have no idea if it's a known issue or if it was sheer dumb luck, but I'm not arguing. I know Drake's Overwhelm works based on past playthroughs, and I'd assume dragons use the same animations and such, but who knows. We won on the second attempt and claimed tons of loot, including Falindin's Reach. I thought the arcane horror past her would be a massive obstacle. However, it actually went far better than it did for our mage. I suspect it's because this arcane horror doesn't like to move, and Falindin's Reach allowed us to attack from such a long range it couldn't use most of its spells. It was stuck spamming Spirit Bolt instead, and we took it down without even using salves or potions. The next section of the ruins, the Werewolf's Lair, is the one I was dreading the most due to the shadow werewolves lurking in the first room. They almost always use Overwhelm from stealth, giving us no chance to stun them before they rip our face off. Maybe survival would let us see them on the minimap while they're stealthed, but even if it did, I don't know how much it would help. We tried tossing acid flasks to break them out of stealth, and while I'm sure most missed entirely, there was one that had to be a direct hit since we were mauled as we threw it, and it didn't seem to affect the shadow werewolves at all. Our mage had similar problems when using spells like Cone of Cold or Mind Blast. They'd sometimes work on stealthed foes, but not always. Unlike our mage, we can survive an overwhelm from a shadow werewolf, but only just. It's such a narrow margin that being found by more than one werewolf is a death sentence, since the others only have to get one hit on us. Plus, any additional shadow werewolves will likely leap on us with their overwhelm before we get to our feet. They are very intent on using that ability. So we had to somehow alert enemies we couldn't see one at a time. Stealth played a crucial role in splitting them. I have no clue how our warrior will manage without it, but that's future Luna's problem. The way enemies are alerted is odd. When a group is alerted the first time, they're alerted as a group like you'd expect. We shoot one and they all run in. However, if we lose them and come back, they'll only attack if they see us directly, allowing us to pick them off one or two at a time. Losing enemies' attention is harder to do with a party, so I suspect the devs didn't notice this or didn't consider it worth fixing. The takeaway is that we want to stroll into the room unstealthed the first time, and then immediately stealth so they're no longer alerted as a group when we return. This allows us to pick off the regular werewolf standing in the doorway, but that's the only easy part. Past that, we shuffle forward until we're mauled by a shadow werewolf. If only one appears, great. We pick ourselves up, chug a potion, and stab the shadow werewolf in the face. If more than one appears, we're already dead and load back. Thankfully, our rogue's obliviousness to the shadow werewolves allows us to drop out of combat and save after each one. If we could see them, we'd have to get much further away to leave combat and save. Even if we say all the right things to convince Zathrian to lift the curse, we still have to knock some sense into him to seal the deal because BioWare really wanted a boss fight here. I was expecting it to be tricky. Mages with enough health to survive for any length of time typically are. But once again, stealth saved the day. We even picked off the 2 Sylvans for extra XP by wedging ourselves into spots Zathrian couldn't see while we were fighting them. Once Zathrian was alone, taking him out was simple, although we used a warmth and ice salve just in case. He hit us with a cone of cold right as we took him out with a dual weapon sweep, so we spent the post-combat cutscene frozen, but we still won. We head to Haven next because, among other things, we'll be able to collect Drake scales for our armor there. The villagers don't pose a threat, and the cultists in the chantry aren't much stronger. Father Eric is dumb enough to start the battle right next to us so we can stun and stab him before he casts spells. The cultists in the ruined temple are largely forgettable provided we ambush any mages first. The cultist assassins are, I wouldn't say dangerous exactly, but we can't doze off while fighting them either. The Ash Wraiths are annoyingly hard to hit with physical attacks, but not impossible. Dual weapon sweep also auto hits provided the target isn't right in front of us, because for some reason there's a gap in the hitbox. But the only foes that reliably send us back to the loading screen are drakes, because they have, say it with me, Overwhelm. We can't survive it from them, even at full health, with no other enemies. Our warrior will likely pile on tons of armor to tank them, but that's not an option for our rogue. Instead, we just hope they don't use it before we slay them. A stellar strategy, I know. Thankfully, they don't seem as keen on using it as the shadow werewolves, and if we use stealth and pinning shot to whittle them down with our bow, we have a decent chance of finishing them off in melee before they use it. Frankly, Colgrim was a pushover by comparison. The two mages with him certainly could have caused problems, but the first one was gone before they could do anything, and the second mage did not make good use of the few seconds their comrade bought them. I don't give flashing lights warnings as often as I should because I'm not sensitive to them, and sometimes I don't realize a warning is needed, but this bit gave me a headache, so if you have sensitivity to flashing lights, please look away until we're done with the High Dragon. Once I start talking about the Urn of Sacred Ashes, you should be good. I went into the first attempt not expecting to get anywhere. We only had materials for about a dozen potions, and we were wearing Dalish armor because I didn't want to backtrack for the Drake scale armor until I was sure we needed it. I doubt this comes as a surprise, but meleeing the High Dragon was a one-way ticket to becoming lunch. Her swipes, while dodgeable like an ogre's massive attacks, were too fast to dodge reliably and tore off about half our health each. Also, I think she has a grab attack where she basically picks us up in her mouth and, well, you can imagine it doesn't go well from there. Although she never used it since we stayed at range. I'm working off vague memories of Alistair screaming in agony and getting tossed around like a chew toy. Sadly, she has a buffet ability that pulled us into melee with her wings. The only way I found to prevent this was to get something between us in the second between the buffet text appearing and the pull. Even then, we'd take damage, but we'd have a chance to get to our feet without getting squashed. If she couldn't pull us into melee, she was happy to spam her fire bolts and dragon breath. As I'm sure you can imagine, these did massive fire damage. A warmth bomb helped, but it was clear the 70% fire resistance from the superior Drake scale armor would be worthwhile. With that in mind, we turned around, backtracked through the whole temple, and journeyed to the far corner of the province to visit Wade's Emporium in Denerim. It's a good thing there's no time or travel limit. You know, Arl Eamon is only slowly wasting away from poison. There's no urgency here. While there, we bought the Felon's Coat, which would be better than the Drake scale armor even with the loss of the set bonus in most situations. Although not against the High Dragon since we specifically need the fire resistance. Anyway, back to the Drake scale set. We need the superior set, so we have to pay Wade to craft 2 sets of Drake scale armor. Each set requires 3 scales. We have 7, so we're good there. And we can pay 10 sovereigns for the first set and 20 for the second set. While the money isn't required, I assume it affects the quality of the armor, so we paid him both times. Now we have the superior Drake scale armor, which provides more armor, dexterity, and defense than our Dalish set, and gives us 70% fire resistance. I tried adding a warmth bomb on top of it, but it only got us to 75% fire resistance, so I assume our resistances are capped at 75. Still, 70% is way better than the 30% the bomb was giving us on its own. And we bought another wagon load of flasks and elf root for potions too. It's a good thing we did, because we used about 50 potions during the fight. Well, I say fight, but we somehow found a spot where the High Dragon seemed happy to sit and spit fire instead of buffeting us or flying around, so all we had to do was shoot and chug potions. I swear I wasn't trying to break the dragon's brain. We moved behind the steam geysers so we could get behind them if she buffeted us, and she found a spot where she could spit fire and seemed happy to stay there. Other than wishing we'd picked up Rapid Shot to speed things along, I don't think we could have hoped for a better outcome. The trials for the Urn of Sacred Ashes aren't worth mentioning. The game gives us 3 ash wraiths for the switch puzzle, so it works in solo runs. With that resolved, I guess it's time to head to the Circle Tower. Hooray! We stock up on ingredients before we go, but sadly getting the ancient elven armor set for spirit resistance isn't an option. I thought all the pieces were in the elven ruins, but the boots are in a cupboard in Lothering, of all places, and Lothering was destroyed a while ago. Thankfully, we have tons of salves to make up for. We have no choice but to attack Wynn near the tower entrance. If we don't, Wynn will force her way into our party no matter what we say, and we can't remove her until we save Irving. Most battles on the way up the tower are simple enough. While we don't have mana clash to annihilate them this time, most of the abominations and demons lack crowd control spells. We get lit on fire a lot, though. There's a nasty encounter with a Desire Demon controlling a Templar, and like the Desire Demon in Redcliffe and Honnleath, she has Winter's Grasp, Cone of Cold, and Cursed Dance. We use stealth to split them up, and it takes a couple tries, but frankly, I think our rogue did better than our mage here because the Templar wasn't able to do much against us, whereas he gave our mage no end of headaches. That also goes for all fights against bewitched Templars, and most of the mages can't do much before we stab them in the face. Of course, there's no way to resist the allure of an afternoon nap, even if it means face planting into red goop, so here we are in the Fade. Most of the fights were designed with a smaller party in mind, so you can imagine how fast we tear through everything. It still took a while due to all the backtracking to get the extra attributes once we had the Fade shape-shifting forms, but you guys get to skip all that and jump straight to the fight with the Sloth Demon. His first form presents some problems since, like the Ogre in the Tower of Ishal, he can repeatedly ram us. We also don't have enough room to run around shooting him with our bow, as this is a much smaller arena than the Tower of Ishal, so we have no choice but to lean on our stuns and melee him, which works most of the time, but can get dicey. The next forms are pushovers, particularly the Rage Demon that the Burning Man form is immune to. However, the last form is a serious threat because it has Crushing Prison as well as Winter's Grasp. We have a greater Spirit Bomb, but we're saving it for Uldred, so we use a lesser Spirit Bomb as well as Elemental Salves, and it still took a couple tries to survive the initial barrage of spells. Once we made it past the first 10 seconds, we were good though. Uldred was somehow easier to deal with. His Crushing Prison did less damage even after our greater Spirit Bomb wore off and all we had was a lesser one. That being said, keeping the mages safe was tricky, and one turned into an abomination because Uldred froze us right as he started mind controlling them. Thankfully, it was just a random mage instead of Irving, so we were able to save the circle despite what we did to win. Oddly, no one ever brings that up. Now that the circle has been saved, we wrap up some side quests. Although we mucked up the lyrium smuggling one since the option to sell Godwyn the lyrium just never came up. The smuggled lyrium has been in our inventory this whole time, but all we can do is blackmail him into giving us 8 sovereigns to not tell the Knight Commander. So that lost us about 60 sovereigns because apparently half the side quests are either outright broken or barely functional without ban patches. Look, I like this game, but I'm gonna yell at it when it's broken or poorly written. Anyway, we run a couple laps around Ferelden to make sure we got all the random encounters, but there's one last thing to do before we tell Arl Eamon we're ready to begin the Landsmeet. Help Morrigan deal with Flemeth. The consensus from our mage run is that Morrigan's quest is fine since we must leave her at camp when we confront Flemeth, making her more akin to a standard quest giver than a companion during this little spot of matricide. Also, flashing lights warning until we're back in Redcliffe, because this is basically High Dragon 2 Electric Boogaloo. We hand Morrigan the black grimoire we found in the Circle Tower, head to Flemeth's hut, and start shooting when Flemeth turns into a High Dragon. Sadly, it doesn't seem like BioWare gave her any additional spells, so it's literally the High Dragon all over again with less room to fly around. We turn on Rapid Shot to make it go a bit quicker, but Otherwise, it's the same, maybe a bit easier since Plymouth doesn't fly around and taking cover behind this bank is more consistent than most spots on the mountain, other than apparently the magical spot that I found earlier. We return to Redcliffe and tell Archdemon to begin the Landsmeet. In reality, we still have several side quests to do that cannot be finished until we have access to the Elven alienage. However, in the name of saving time in what is shaping up to be an insanely long video, we'll move on to the next main quest, rescuing Queen Honora from Arlhow. We return to the place where our adventure began, and in a fit of nostalgia, we commence stabbing the replacement guards in the face. They're stronger than the old ones, but we manage as long as we split them up with stealth. We free everyone in the dungeons, and even Arlhow doesn't give us much trouble. However, I'm sure the fight you're all waiting for is Sir Cothrin's ambush. Well, our rogue may have actually fared better than our mage in this battle, as stealth allowed us to easily slip out of the initial wave of scatter shots from the archers lining the room. From there, we simply fell back to the nearest hallway and drew them out one or two at a time. Even Cothrin herself couldn't do much due to the simple fact she could barely hit us. Granted, the one blow she landed took off half our health, so if one of her archers had stunned us, she would have been able to easily finish us off. But we lured her away from the archers, so that's a moot point. Next, we have to see what's riling up the elves in the alienage, which means we can finally visit and claim Fang, the dagger we picked our origin for. I always forget how long it takes for the alienage to open up. Compared to most of the other origins, you have to wait such a long time to interact with the people that your character started with. Anyway, we have to deal with the Tevinter slavers Loghain let in before we can visit dear old dad on account of the fact they've captured him. There was a time facing so many mages would have been difficult, but it's long past. Stealth, combined with our insane damage and stuns, allows us to mow them down before they can utter a word. Since we didn't take the deal from the noble who kidnapped Shiani at the beginning, or the one from the slavers, our father gives us a welcome home present, our mother's dagger, Fang. While the Thorn of the Old Gods served us well, Fang is hands down better, so we put it in our main hand and switch the Rose's Thorn to our offhand. It would have been really nice to have this earlier, Pops. Seriously, as far as he knew, we were leaving forever when we set out for Ostagar to become a Grey Warden, and it didn't occur to him to give us the dagger our mum left us then? Okay, asshat. With the alienage settled, it's time for the Landsmeet. Even though we have all the evidence against Loghain, Honora's support, and got the Grand Cleric to denounce Loghain by bringing up the blood mage Loghain freed to poison Eamon, we still have to duel him. What's the point of winning the debate in the Landsmeet if it ends in a fight either way? Not that it's much of a duel. We stun Loghain and stab him a few times, problem solved. Of course, we still have to chew through a ton of darkspawn to reach the end. First, the ones attacking Redcliffe. We clear out the village for extra XP and move up to the castle. The only enemy that makes an impression is the Ogre Alpha. I wouldn't say it caused any real issues, but we had to fall back on the stun, kick, shoot strategy for the first time in a while. We've been able to take down lesser ogres by simply stunning and stabbing them, but this one had far too much health for that. Being grabbed is also still a death sentence. It takes a while for lesser ogres to pummel us, but since we have no one to free us, we'll die eventually, so we shouldn't stay in melee unless they're stunned. It's time for the senior Grey Warden we stumbled across in How's dungeon, Riordan, to fill us in on the costs of slaying an archdemon, and for Morrigan to offer us a way out. You know what? Why not? It could be argued that it's allowing Morrigan to help, but at least we can take part in the ritual ourselves instead of getting Alistair to do it. With that done, it's time to sprint back to Denerim because the devs realized Redcliffe wasn't dramatic final battle material. Most of the many darkspawn are grunts we one-shot, so even though it looks like there are tons of enemies, most don't matter unless we get stunned in the middle of a horde. Around this time, we got our last level, level 22, and a last-minute talent tome from Bodane, allowing us to get scattershot and momentum. And good freaking lord, do I wish we'd gotten momentum sooner. It massively increases our melee attack speed at the cost of severely slowing our stamina regen. Without gear bonuses, it may drain stamina while active. I'm not certain. I was worried the stamina cost would be too steep, but between the willpower from being an elven bard, the willpower from the fade, and the stamina bonuses on our gear, we're able to keep it up and use other abilities. Scattershot is good when it chains to additional targets, but the chaining is inconsistent, so we save it for slowing down ogres. The first battle that stood out was the Darkspawn General attacking the alienage. We faced the one in the market too, but it was a melee fighter, whereas the one in the alienage was a mage. We have about 50% spell resistance between the Spell Ward necklace and the runes on Rose's Thorn, but an unlucky misdirection hex or Curse of Mortality can shut us down, and we had to contend with several alphas, ogres, and tons of grunts. Remember when I said a weak ogre can insta-pummel us with a grab? Well, the first attempt against the general went well, but we didn't get a chance to save before more Darkspawn ran in, and an ogre happened to grab us when dirty fighting and stealth were on cooldown, so we couldn't counter it. I'll let you imagine the colorful phrases that brought out of me. On top of that, we had to protect Shiani. She stays back for the most part, but a Genlock Alpha slipped by. Thankfully, we got to her in time. In return for our help, she gives us the Dawn Ring, which may be useful for our allies. On that note, it's time for the battle at the city gates with the allies we left behind. Morrigan, Alistair, and Oghren. We could let the nameless soldiers handle it, but where's the fun in that? We level them up and hand them whatever equipment we happen to have, which includes some decent stuff like the Dawn and Dusk rings and our old Thorn of the Dead Gods. I even set up Alistair and Oghren's tactics since we mostly controlled Morrigan, but I forgot to turn off hold position, so they didn't do much. Feel free to facepalm, I certainly did. Now we have to fight our way to the top of Fort Draken. I wish more battles here stood out, but the Genlock Conjurer was weaker than the Darkspawn General in the Alienage, so there's no point in talking about him. I guess the Genlock Assassins were somewhat dangerous. At the very least, we had to chug a few potions. Darkspawn just don't tend to have many crowd control abilities unless they're mages, so there isn't much they can do that we can't heal off with our horde of potions. One group had a dragon thrall that we ran in terror from because it had overwhelm, and we took it down from a distance after it got stuck on a ramp. I wasn't even trying to get it stuck, it just happened. And just like that, we've arrived at the roof of Fort Drakon with minimal fuss. Will the Archdemon give us a challenge? Well, to be honest, not really. I was worried when I found out how flaky stealth was. Getting anywhere near the Archdemon broke it, and he spit homing purple bolts even while we were hidden. But it was only a minor inconvenience. If we were dumb enough to melee him, he'd squash us in seconds. But as long as we stayed at range and kept the minions under control, the damage was very survivable. We used a lesser spirit bomb since I assume his purple bolts deal spirit damage, and the Darkspawn could be a threat when they combined with the damage from the Archdemon, but if we're out of sight of the spots where they spawn in, they don't join the battle. Sure, we alerted them a couple times because the Archdemon flew off and we had to run past them to get to the Archdemon, but once we were out of sight of the spawn points, we simply picked off any minions that were after us before refocusing on the Archdemon. The Ballistae were also a big help. They did more damage than our bow, and they staggered the Archdemon with each hit, but they jammed. Unlike our mage, we could repair them 3 times before the game said we had insufficient skill. And considering we have nearly 80 cunning and 2 ranks of the lockpicking talent, I suspect repairing them a 4th time is impossible. Still, we took off about 3/4 of the Archdemon's health with the Ballistae, which saved us a lot of time. We finished him off with our bow, proving that yes, you can beat Dragon Age Origins as a solo rogue. I blazed through the last part of the game, but nothing really challenged us past the Shadow Werewolves. Things were interesting through the Elven Ruins and Haven, but after that we had most of our endgame gear, and we were around level 20, so we could tear just about anything without overwhelm a new one, and only had to retry battles due to the occasional unlucky stun or spell. The biggest roadblock of the run by far, at least after we obtained combat stealth at level 8, was the corrupted Spider Queen. She held me up for an evening. I wish we could get combat stealth earlier, because if we had it in Ostagar, I think we could have stayed on hard instead of normal, maybe even nightmare. But as it stands, I don't know how we'd get past the Tower of Ashal. I doubt we could craft our way out of it. The Ostagar Quartermaster has unlimited flask, but only 3 corruptor agents and 8 elf roots. Even if those double when his inventory resets, we would still only be able to craft half a dozen grenades and a handful of potions prior to Lothering. He also has a few ready-made grenades and potions, assuming we had the gold to spare, but that would still only bring us up to 9 grenades plus whatever we looted along the way. And looting 5 acid flasks was already pretty lucky. Most helpful talents are tough to get early, with the exceptions of Rapid Shot and Pinning Shot. For anyone curious, this is our final build. We didn't invest much in strength. We only have 26 due to the +8 from gear and the points we got in the Fade. We only put 4 in it from leveling up. Magic, willpower, and constitution got 0 investment from levels. Everything past 10 is from our racial bonuses, the Fade, gear, or our specializations, because nearly all our levels went into cunning and to a lesser degree dexterity. As for skills, the ones that mattered most were the first rank of herbalism for crafting potions, the second rank of poison making for crafting grenades, and 4 ranks of combat training for weapon talents. Coercion also obviously helped. We could have gotten by with only 2 ranks if we'd stuck to persuasion, but got all 4 anyway because frankly we were running out of useful things to take. I mean, we ended up with all 4 ranks of survival for the paltry resistance bonuses, for crying out loud. The first rank of stealing certainly got us extra gold, but opening up extra quests was its most important contribution. I'm not going to go through all our talents, but besides stealth, I'd say lethality, riposte, dual weapon sweep, momentum, pinning shot, dirty fighting, and below the belt were the most useful. Followed by coup de grace, dual weapon finesse, exploit weakness, song of courage, rapid shot, and scatter shot. We either rarely or never used the other active talents like deadly strike, and the other passives didn't make much difference. I had high hopes for dual weapon expert's bleed damage, but it was only 1 point every couple seconds, so at best it stopped a few assassins from stealthing. As for talents I considered but didn't get around to, Punisher might have been nice for knockdowns, and the 20% dodge from evasion would have been great, except its dodge interrupts other animations, and that seemed like it'd be annoying or even deadly if it interrupted, say, stunning an ogre. Master Archer and Arrow of Slaying also caught my eye, but they're all the way at the end of lackluster lines, so we invested our talents elsewhere. I was mildly surprised that all the extra quests and trap disarming and lockpicking XP only got us 1 level over our mage, but 1 extra level is still better than nothing. Anyway, I hope the early pain of that run was entertaining enough to make up for the easy endgame. If it was, then please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It really helps the channel. Channel memberships are also a thing if you want to support the channel even more, get your name in the opening credits, and get access to new challenge runs as soon as they're uploaded. Usually a few hours to a few days early. But regardless of all that, thank you for watching to the very end of the video, and I'll see you all next time to find out if we can beat Classic Oblivion without healing. Also, I apologize for how long it took to get this run out. OBS kept borking our audio. Whichever mic was on the right channel cut in and out and sounded horrible.
Okay, this is a test recording with Just Gain. Just Gain applied. Just digital gain. Hopefully we can actually get to, I don't know, not cut off in the weird spots that was cutting off in. But we're going to have to troubleshoot literally every setting, and this is not good, but it worked in Audacity, so it's obviously just that OBS sucks. Thanks, OBS.
We fixed it a few times, but the last time it broke, nothing we tried worked. Buying a new interface didn't fix it, and we've temporarily gone back to Windows to get this run out. We might have to record our audio in Audacity and put it all together in editing. We're not sure yet. I can't promise things will be back to normal because we're still fighting this issue, but we're trying.